I grow hair. I get mature. The testes descend finally.
Yeah, and your
pics
children
spawn
become
facial
very
hair.
well managed.
And your hair grows.
Your kids look really cute, man. Nice picture.
Thanks, man.
Yep.
So, Chris, you were missing yesterday, and you come back with all this facial hair. I wonder if it's really you.
Because Anna syndrome.
He didn't
I was
have
in
this hair
I
5
was
hours
stuck
ago.
in meetings all day yesterday, and I got more today. So fun.
That's what I figured.
Oh.
I'm gonna start blocking out my schedule for tech news, and then my team will be screwed.
Priorities.
Okay, look at what we're mm-hmm. Oh, Alexandra found a prediction I made in an interview 2 years ago. I just found this tweet. If Alexandra's on stage.
Oh, yes.
I'm retweeting it. It says, she says, look at the prediction I found from Tyler's past from a 2019 article. The interviewer asked me, and what do you think will be the next big tech platform? And I responded, the next platform, some argue, is virtual reality. I would argue that it would be the combination of Apple's Siri, Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa fighting to put their AI assistants into every device in your home, car, office, and around town so that you have smart offices, smart homes, smart cities powered by their AIs. And then she's responding to a headline that Honda will use Google's embedded Android automotive in its cars starting next year, 2022. So
pretty spot on.
Yeah, it still has a ways to go.
Tyler admitted you're from the future.
Give yourself a clap.
Tyler Domus.
Where's that button?
You're from
Where's
the future. Back to the future.
So I just
reminds me of remember Greg's. I like this little never be out indicated. That's a great example of you not being out indicated, man. Right?
Greg Duffy.
Well, I just did another interview that went. It just with a friend of mine, a podcast really, but it was like an hour and a half long podcast interview, and it just came out yesterday. It's a pretty good one. It's a lot of my personal. It's kind of it's a lot like what Cheryl does in her rooms with like she did today with
Dude, Cheryl needs to do a Tyler
with
spotlight.
Hans.
We want to hear about you, brother.
I just did one for an hour and a half with a friend of mine.
Can you tweet out the link to that podcast?
Yeah, let's see it.
Let me find it real fast. Hold on.
You need the Cheryl version though, because she's gonna ask the tough questions.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey Tyler, what happened to all your hair, man?
Why you don't have hair anyways?
wait, hold on. If you did that one for you, Chris, could you do one for all of us to have like lots more facial hair? Just run that same process on all of us. I mean, then just call it the tech news effect. Run Tyler first.
No, Lakeisha, you can lend Tyler some hair. Can you offer him some?
Just don't give Cheryl an afro, Chris. You know she has afro envy.
Your profile picture is cool, Lakeisha. Another mark.
Yeah, you see?
We all need froze.
Okay. I just tweeted it to my... Okay, I'll tweet it to the Tech News Twitter account here. Give me 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. Okay. There it goes. Okay.
Air horn.
Okay, so...
Yes.
Air horn. Thank you. Here we go.
Have you do your
the top story, happy Thursday, is from... Well, let me do a quick hand-raised check, as Cheryl no doubt is going to remind me to do.
And also Twitter live stream.
We got the Twitter live stream. Okay, good. So the first story is from The Verge, and it says, Facebook details something called Ego4D, an AI research project done in partnership with 13 universities to improve egocentric perception with potential to improve AI assistance. With these AI assistants again. What an interesting coincidence. AI tools that could one day appear in Facebook's AR glasses. Facebook is pouring a lot of time and money into augmented reality. Facebook is pouring a lot of time and money into AR, including building its own AR glasses. With Ray-Ban right now, these gadgets can only record and share imagery. But what does the company think such devices will be used for in the future? A new research project led by Facebook's AI team suggests the scope of the company's ambitions. It imagines AI systems that are constantly analyzing people's lives using first-person video, recording what they see, do, hear in order to help them with everyday tasks. Well, kind of like I was saying about my answer to that question that Alexandra said, like these, using AIs to hear and see everything that you do. Facebook's researchers have outlined a series of skills it wants these systems to develop, including episodic memory, answering questions like, where did I leave my keys? And audio-visual diarization, remembering who said what when. So it's super Black Mirror type stuff, where you're essentially augmenting your memory. And that's
okay. All right. So Facebook essentially is having aging demographics. They're mostly boomers that post racist tweets now with things that reposted from their memes from some state-based agency. They're getting old. They're forgetting things. So this is Facebook Alzheimer's edition. Where did I leave my keys? What was it? What was my name again?
Well, yeah. How many kids do I have? Yeah.
Facebook can remind you for essentially people losing their minds.
It's all those people that suffer from CRS. It's called can't remember shit syndrome.
We joke, but there's actually some serious issues about that stuff with things. But the reason I do bring it up is that, like, Facebook demographics, part of the whole thing that I thought was the most crazy about the whole Senate hearings about, oh no, you're targeting children and everything. It's like, well, actually, if they weren't doing that, they get into trouble because the average demographics are getting so old right now that actually becomes an existential issue after a certain point.
Right now, the tasks outlined above cannot be achieved reliably by any AI system, and Facebook stresses that this is a research project rather than a commercial development. However, it's clear that the company sees functionality like these as the future of AR computing. Definitely thinking about augmenting reality and what we'd like to be able to do with it. There's possibilities down the road that we'd be leveraging this kind of research, Facebook AI research scientist Kristen Gaum told The Verge. This is leading to their own version of Google Assistant. I mean, it's
they're saying what they're going to do with it. It's ads. They're going to sell ads. That's what they do.
Yes. They're going to collect information. This is the thing. And boy, does this fit perfectly into my prediction that Alexandra was referring to, which is that if they have a speaker near you where they can hear and see you, a speaker and a camera, but specifically a speaker, and they can hear everything that you're talking about all the time. And if they have devices that allow them to see what you're looking at all the time, like AR glasses, then the value of the ads they can show you is just unbelievable, mind-blowingly valuable stuff that they will be able to make. They'll be able to propose everything you could potentially need to buy even before you realize you want to buy it.
God help you if the political party of choice that you favor yourself with essentially is not currently in power and then decides they'd like to flex a bit. Regardless of whatever thing that just sprung to your mind of like, oh, those guys would use it. Now imagine it's flipped to the other party. Whatever party just came to your mind, the other one. Now imagine versions of this in every single jurisdiction, every single place worldwide, even the places that aren't democracies. Now basically play this technology and then tell the government, oh yeah, you want us to basically regulate our stuff in your country. Oh no, you can't play with that data because that stuff is protected. Yeah, that ain't going to fly. Once they realize these capabilities exist, they're going to demand access to it, and it's going to get really interesting here.
Well, the examples that they give of remembering who said what, that means that they not only heard everything, they heard it from everybody around you. So that means they will and semantically understand what it all means and put it all together. This is that's why
I remembered that I need to go buy something essentially like the Amazon version of this. Alexa essentially can be my external memory. And by the way, I actually you were talking to your friend last week, but did you remember that essentially you need to order towels off of that, and there's a good discount for that right now. And you remember your grandkids, their birthdays today, and by the way, here's a great present you can get for them, and by the way, it's like every single memory gets modified for commerce.
But
So
it's
the
so
commerce lens.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The commerce lens. We always go there so rapidly, but quite frankly, I think we're all down with, hey, we're in. They call it in market in e-commerce when you're kind of like starting to think about a purchase. It's just like you maybe go to a page or you do your first search. That's when you're in market, and so everybody that's kind of the value add of all the sniffing and all the cookies and all this is now everybody knows you're in market, and that's how either you're Google or you're one of the other e-commerce companies. But let's think of the use cases outside of commerce, right? Because those are the ones that we need to be just aware of to understand what we're stepping into. That's what I would propose is, what are some of those use cases that are a little more just risky or something outside of just, hey, this person is going to maybe buy this at some point and who knows where they're going to buy it, and that's that.
Well, it's assisted thinking. That's what you're referring to. It's assisted thinking. It goes from assisted living, and then assisted memory, and then it's just assisted thinking. As in, you're no longer an individual. You are a subset, an add-on to an existing.
Oh, that's
system,
great! Oh, you just unlocked why they call it Ego4D, because it's your ego is you, but now it's in a 4D.
Exactly.
And it's not real. It's not physical reality. This has been the start of the cyborg of, the smartphone becoming the real personal computer for all of humanity, right? And then so assisted thinking, and what are all the implications of that? And quite frankly, this has already been going on. If you get back to the Instagram stuff, where somebody's self-esteem is affected by how we're interacting with these services and through these services with other people and things like that.
We don't even use phone numbers anymore in our mind. Like, when we were kids, we knew probably 200 phone numbers, and now we're lucky if we remember 5.
I think that the idea of this, everybody has their own reality, is just it's not true. There's a physical reality. We have different perceptions of reality, and the role that these technologies and apps and the AI, the way that they're used, these perceptions of reality has been what's been, or at least that's what can be kind of undesirable to some aspects of it. So I think that's something that, as an architecture, as a system, as users, we should be able to have some level of control of how our perception of reality is affected or even hijacked.
And you can imagine, like Tyler, like a celebrity selling their 2-hour pass, having connection over VR, and then having access to these celebrity glasses. Could be amazing.
It says such ambitions have huge privacy implications. Privacy experts are already worried about how Facebook AR glasses allow wearers to covertly record members of the public. Such concerns will only be exacerbated if future versions of the hardware not only record footage but analyze and transcribe it, turning wearers into walking surveillance machines. The name of Facebook's research project is Ego4D, which refers to the analysis of first-person or egocentric video. It consists of 2 major components, an open data set of egocentric video and a series of benchmarks that Facebook thinks AI systems could be able to tackle in the future. The data set is the biggest of its kind ever created, and Facebook partnered with 13 universities around the world to collect the data. In a total, some 3,200 hours of footage were recorded by 855 participants living in 9 different countries. The universities, rather than Facebook, were responsible for collecting the data. Participants, some of whom were paid, wore GoPro cameras and AR glasses to record video of unscripted activity. This ranges from construction work to baking to playing with pets and socializing with friends. All footage was de-identified by the universities, which included blurring the faces of bystanders and removing any personally identifiable information. Grauman says...
Does not work. De-anonymization does not work.
Grauman says the data set is the first of its kind in both scale and diversity. The nearest comparable project, she says, contains 100 hours of first-person footage shot entirely in kitchens. We've opened up the eyes and the eyes of these AI systems to more than just kitchens in the UK and Sicily, but to footage from Saudi Arabia, Tokyo, LA, and Colombia. The second component of Ego4D is a series of benchmarks or tasks that Facebook wants researchers around the world to try and solve using AI systems trained on its dataset. The company describes these as the following. For episodic memory, what happened when? Where did I leave my keys? Forecasting, what am I likely to do next? Wait, you've already added salt to this recipe? Like it could warn you that you're about to make a mistake. That's crazy. A
mistake in its reference frame, as in a mistake that it decides.
Yeah, so a very simple way of thinking about this is imagine doing object detection. Everything you see in the thing, like you run like YOLO, or essentially one of the tiny nets that you're looking at. And what you do is you basically detect, like, say, an object is like, I see a fork, I see a plant, I see a bag of sugar. And essentially what you can do is you can mark those as the time codes in the video. And you can use it as an input for the training sequence data for saying, well, every time essentially I know that they're basically under this task, these three things are seen, and then a fourth thing is seen. So you can actually start to do some very simple logic trees based upon that. And that is something that's really cool about neural nets, is that you can actually start to have these sorts of patterns emerge autonomously, which gets really, really interesting if the training data set is rich enough or annotated enough. But the thing that Facebook's doing here that's a little more interesting is not necessarily that essentially they're saying, hey, we start to go per people's heads. What they did is they got all these universities to say, we're going to basically provide a research apparatus so that Facebook can say, oh, it's not just us. Look at all these projects that are spawned. This is a whole space that's working on this, which is going to be very useful for regulators and other things that come later.
So I just tweeted it's a 5-minute YouTube video made by Facebook about this Ego4D. The other examples is hand and object manipulation. What am I doing? Teach me how to play the drums. Like you sit down at a set of drums and it could teach you what to do with your hands and the object that you're at. And then audio visual diarization was the one that we talked about before. Who said what? What was the main topic during class? Social interaction. Who is interacting with whom? Help me better to hear the person talking to me at this noisy restaurant.
Enterprise AR, they've already for a few years now been using AR dashboards and things for workers out and about on in manufacturing, just out on site type of thing for training and things. So using it in the context for training and using AR for that is a great value add, right? Because you're not carrying a manual, and it's just it's something you can actually talk to. That's a big push. That's a big add. But I just think that some of these other uses, it's just people need to opt into these things, and they should have full disclosure of what a couple things. One is what are the potential downsides, and secondly, doggone it, these companies, this is valuable data. Would you talk about you're the one who coined juicy, right? It's like it's valuable, right? It's juicy because it's valuable, and I just think that the one of the things about all this AI stuff is the value of the users, their contribution to the data that these companies get to monetize. I just think that there should be something about that as well.
So tying in with this in Cheryl's last stream, which is hosting the Be My Eyes gentleman with things, which Hansa here's on stage, which I'm a huge fan of their company. Well, one of the things that when we did a startup in this space for accessibility, one of the challenges that we were actually anticipating was for people that are visually impaired wearing navigation headsets. We're looking at the social things of if they're wearing essentially a camera array on their face everywhere, how that would basically be socially interpreted. So one of the things we made a very strong effort for was actually, we talked to like the Marvel previs team and stuff like that with things, and to see if they could basically work it into the storylines or whatever, have characters more with like augmented reality glasses and stuff. And I was very surprised seeing the Spider-Man Far From Home movie. They took it a little bit farther than some of our early conversations were. But what was interesting is this whole thing of like having cameras in a public space. Excited about was the idea of saying, well, if that data is valuable, then that actually provides a new income stream. And because even under the most ultra privacy tastic, we don't want to have cameras in public spaces like regulation environment or social rejection element or glass hole, like, just beat someone up when they have it. The blind people are always going to basically be considered to be an exception class where they need to have something like that. And what's interesting is you can establish a monetary compensation scheme for that, where essentially people that are basically having visual impairment or blindness are basically having the sensor data being something that can be used in a way that's socially acceptable, but also basically providing an enormous service for essentially permanent 24/7 wearing of essentially of data sets, and then the parts where they're out in public they can actually monetize in a way that basically actually adds service to the businesses they patronize and other things like that, to be to the point where you could have there's a whole thing in that direction. But anyways, those things have gone a very, very different direction now. It looks like Facebook and Zuckerberg are going with the socially normalizing everything. So I will see what happens. I hope they remember some of the people that can actually benefit from some of these technologies rather than just the market segments. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it develops.
It says the Facebook says that systems trained on Ego4D might one day not only be used in wearable cameras, but also home assistant robots, which also rely on first-person cameras to navigate the world around them. Here's the quote. The project has the chance to really catalyze work in this field in a way that hasn't really been possible yet, to move our field from the ability to analyze piles of photos and videos that were human taken with a very special purpose to this fluid, ongoing first-person visual stream that AR systems, robots need to understand in the context of ongoing activity. That's actually very, very cool. So the way I interpret that is, currently, we read headlines every day. In fact, every half hour about how AI is at any image type thing where it's better than humans. It's better at doctors at detecting cancers and different brain scans. It's better than doctors at doing anything that has anything to do with looking at images, and it helps.
Like, can it walk across the room without bumping into things?
Right, precisely. So it can do anything based off of images. It can be vastly superior to humans, even experts. And then the question is, what about taking all the analysis that is done to images, we can now apply not to videos, but to life scenarios, so that AIs could start to understand what it means to bake a bunch of cookies. How to make chocolate chip cookies. Okay, and then you make a video, essentially, of how to bake chocolate chip cookies, and you do that 1,000 times. And then the AI learns, okay, got it. I know how to make chocolate chip cookies now. Thank you very much. And now somebody new who doesn't know how to make chocolate chip cookies says, hey, AI, I want to make chocolate chip cookies. It's like, no problem. Go ahead, see that salt shaker over there? Go ahead and pick that up. You're going to need a little bit of sugar. Great. Get a bowl, get a spoon, put this, put that. Oh, no, that's too much sugar. That's one of the scenarios that they're talking about. Playing the drums was the other. But that idea of analyzing not just how to make cookies, but how to do literally everything. And the how to do is just one of the 5. It's also the ability to retain the canonical history of every experience you've ever had and be able to recall it. That's kind of the augmented memory bit. And the forecasting, that's the really crazy bit. Based on what's happening right now, what's likely to happen next. That's really crazy.
Well, that reminds me of that movie where you could rewind and forward all the memories on a dial back and forth.
Yeah, there was a Black Mirror about that.
Architecturally,
Oh,
I'm sorry. Architecturally, Facebook is not strategically oriented to actually do this. The real-time ability requires, local processing power. And so it's not Apple, we talked about this in the past in terms of the importance of having a device in the user's hands because you need that processing power. It'll be interesting to see what competitive things are done. You already see, like in this generation of the ad privacy and just control, how Apple's trying to, or has kind of try to shut down Facebook's ability, right, or at least allow users to push back on that. Well, when you start to need this level of processing power, whatever phone you're on or the AR device on your head or whatever, you've got to have the hardware has to be has to be really tightly coupled with who's processing the AI on the edge.
I mean, this is why they invested in Oculus with things, and they've got all sorts of divisions working on wearables. One thing that's interesting for people that are interested in this kind of research, there's a company called 20BN. I strongly recommend people look it up. There's for like 20 billion neurons in your brain. They have an embodied AI, essentially they call Millie. It's one of the most impressive demos I've seen in person. I've seen keep in mind, I go to a lot of trade shows in the pre-COVID era with things. I go to see a lot of very impressive things. This is near the top of my list of impressive demos. And the reason why it was impressive is because the execution of it was just flawless. What it was focused on was they had an AI trainer where essentially, so you walk up in the room and you see essentially this character and she waves at you. And there's this weird thing of when you're used to seeing ads, to kind of look away from the billboards and everything. But when you see someone wave at you, you feel this impression of waving back. And then she responds to you doing that and says, hey, come on over as a thing. And it's one of the weirdest things because they have this real-time AI running on the edge on the local device. And it's on this giant, and it's a large screen, but it's basically designed to be exactly at eye level. And then when it has groups of people around, it'll start calling out people, hey, girl in the red hat, you should try this kind of thing. It's like, here, try this kind of thing. And she'll basically respond to everyone in the room. And when you see an AI work a crowd of people in a complex social environment, it is astounding. But they use something very similar to this in their training infrastructure, training the underlying data sets. And I think that there's some real merit in that with when you basically say, hey, try this thing, distribute to a group of crowd workers, and basically put it into essentially a form that you can actually be more trained as a general case model. And they have actually data sets they've released for this. If people are interested in this, like running some of their GitHub code or doing things, they actually have public versions of the data sets very similar to what Facebook has. One of the reasons I'm recommending them specifically is because they are a German-based company. I actually spent like 2 hours grilling them on essentially how they were thinking about this from a privacy perspective. And I was astounded essentially some of the measures they had taken for that. It's interesting to see essentially for Facebook moving into more the egocentric type kinds of viewpoints. There's some other existing work that already exists in the space. It'll be very interesting to see how they compare as this space expands.
What is it called, Chris?
It's called 20BN or 20 billion. Millie, if you say Millie, Millie, it's a little bit easier to find. If she has like a fitness app, is I think one's a more popular thing. It's a small little 30-man team, but it's fantastic what they built. I think they've got like 200 people on tap at any time of the day. You can just basically dial up their API and they'll basically get a bunch of people for, if you want to do baking cookies, you want to get essentially like 100 hours of videos baking cookies, you can have that essentially within a day or two with things with that. So it's crazy why they've got the whole thing set up. DM me and I'll send you a link directly, essentially, if it doesn't come on DuckDuckGo.
Thanks.
To your point, Chris, you've already got Amazon releasing the Ring drone and then their in-house little roller droid, and then you've got the cameras now open to third-party APIs and whatnot. So again, it's the AI integration into your life via the headset AR for Facebook versus the actual in-house kit that Amazon is already deploying. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins that race.
I'm seeing a future where hardware is really just an interface layer for the fangs to get to give you Siri,
right.
to give you Google, to give you
exactly.
and Clubhouse is really the first step. The Star Trek future has a computer that's everywhere, and you say, hey, computer, do this, and it knows everything. So I think that's where we're going, where literally you're walking by other people's devices, and they're responding to you, and it's very likely you're going to pay some kind of crypto to access their device out while you're out and about. I don't know.
This is when it becomes socially and ethically justifiable to carry around $5 jammer devices that jams everything in a 100-meter radius. And when that becomes socially acceptable to hand out like candy to people that aren't happy, all of a sudden, all that wonderful little 5G that's vulnerable in millimeter wavelengths suddenly gets a lot more tricky to run. That's assumptions that essentially for active denial are not built into the network.
We had a headline 24 hours ago when we were here about the Philippines was cracking down on the ability for people to buy. Somebody had sent out a mass signal just before an election to promote the alternative to the current Duarte, and he freaked out and is now banning any platforms from selling it. It currently required a license, but obviously people got a hold of the equipment and used it without a license, so now they're banning the equipment from being sold in the Philippines. I got
What was the equipment? It was like a telecommunications
It's
device or what?
it somehow sent out an SMS
Is
like
it a
message.
stinger? Is it a
Oh yeah.
stinger?
So that's actually kind of there's a really fun older technology around this. There's the SMS version. There's also a Bluetooth version. This was actually there was a brief time period before when people weren't quite entirely sure how to do these marketing, and then you've got like geo, local, social. Are we going to like do this over the internet? We're going to pay Facebook for it, or do it at physical events. There was a brief time frame where a bunch of market materialized for basically creating devices that would create these extended Bluetooth connection events to anyone nearby. And they also had an SMS version that would hook in directly into the cell phone tower, and then used it to send essentially saying, "Hey, you're at the party, you're at the giant stadium event. Hey, here's the thing for the latest sport game," kind of things. That market never quite materialized, but they did make a lot of tech for it, and you see them occasionally pop up in these third world markets of like, wait, someone made what now? Because they get developed and they do exist. They're just not very used.
I found the article. It says public warned against use of illegal text blasters, boosters, and jammers. Global Telecom on Thursday backed the National Telecommunication Commission recent ban against the sale of SMS or text blasters online, as it warned the public against the use of such equipment, including illegal signal boosters and jammers. In an advisory, Globe, which is the publication, and such equipment, that's the telecom. Globe Telecom said such equipment are intended to be used during extreme periods of disaster and can cause widespread interference. These network disruptors include slow or failed connections, dropped calls, and voice quality issues, and even loss of cell phone signals. Illegal signal boosters, it said, come in the form of indoor and outdoor antennas or wireless adapters that boost network coverage and signal by hogging bandwidth from cell sites. As a result, such devices interfere with the airwaves and interfere with the mobile signs, and the reason that they're banning them is because somebody from his political opponent team used these to get out the message to vote for his opponent.
When people realize how easy it is to manipulate electromagnetic spectrum, and the fact is that it is basically a wide open terrain, it takes you less than a month to go from I know nothing about the field to you can create useful technology in this space to 1 month later to you can replace global telecoms with that amount of knowledge. It's going to be open field day. This is one of the reasons why when people talk about the dystopic future where corporations control everything, it's like we're kind of already there. The question is whether or not people are pissed off about it. And the thing about it is that the actual underpinning foundations are very, very weak, and they aren't very strong from a technological standpoint. So it's kind of more of a political thing of whether or not people are unhappy with it or not. And I'm just grabbing popcorn at this point with things. So let someone else have the fun.
It's just like the Havana syndrome stuff, right? The technology's always been there. It's just we've always been working under this assumption that humanity wouldn't get that crazy or get that evil.
Okay, all right. Ready, audience, with things? This is a big moment. You take some batteries, you have a capacitor, and then you basically take a big round of wire, measure it out to the wavelength you want, and you wrap it in a coil. Congratulations, you got a jammer device. And if you want to change the frequency, you change the length of the wire. If you want to turn it into an antenna, you basically take some tin foil and you basically cut it out into a shape. You can get the plans online. It's a shape. You could literally teach 5-year-olds to make these things. I would love to make those, by the way. Have like the arts and crafts kit that essentially they hand out to all the schools, and you teach the kids to make their own antennas and communication systems. Like if we standardize that, the fact is that the knowledge is very difficult to suppress once you already have it. But the thing is that because that knowledge is more carefully controlled these days, people assume that it's difficult. It's more of a regulatory thing than anything else.
Once people catch on too, it's really fast. It's like this Topanga thing, the plasma light. It's literally just a cylinder. It's a hollowed out cylinder that they've determined the shape of it equals the perfect focal distance for a light bulb. But they can easily change that focal distance to whatever they want, right? And that's and it's just really easy to do, and that's the scary part. And Chris is absolutely dead on. Once more of the criminal element understands RF and EMF, we're fucked.
I'm not talking criminal. I'm just talking general society. It's ridiculous. There's less than 10,000 people in the world that actually are radio and spectrum frequency engineers. Less than 5,000 of them work for essentially civilian sector. The rest are military doing radar systems and such. When you look at essentially how much of cyber warfare and electronic warfare packages and how much things for telecoms and everything else, when you look at how few people actually provide the underlying foundations for most of our telecommunications and most of our just general infrastructure. It's astounding. And frankly put, essentially breaking up that knowledge monopoly, essentially, and making it more commonly available to people. And basically, I think that essentially people will not feel as locked into our current platforms when you realize how easy it is to replicate it from a physics perspective, rather than relying on 40 pieces of technology all stacked on top of each other that are, frankly put, kind of really overwrought at this point. You can make basic messaging systems with almost nothing. I mean, it's like handcrafted tools.
So, Chris, let's flip to page two to just voting in general, right? The voting rights and what's going on in D.C., right here in the U.S. Everybody, where you have one half of the aisle is about making it easy for citizens to vote, and you have the other half of the aisle who are concerned about. Based on concerns that are not at all objectively true, based on a bunch of studies, and they're trying to limit how we can vote as citizens, which is like the number one, that's the foundational right you have in a democracy. So what you're hearing is these technologies that are not in the future, they are happening now, right? Are available to really disrupt if a state has in their laws maybe only 2 days that you can vote, and one of the days is the day of the election, and maybe you have 1 day before that because you have laws like that that are already in effect. It's the ability for nefarious or just people joking around and using different technologies to massively disrupt a very close vote it's not even that it's possible.
You don't need electronics for that. You don't need advanced communications. You just need basically a postal director that doesn't want to do his job as head of the postmaster.
Well, there's multiple ways to throw it off the rails, right? But I just wanted to translate this back to what's important to all of us, right? So just be aware and vote your conscience, obviously. But if you believe in the ability to get an accurate vote, let's just position it as let's get an accurate vote that reflects what the people want versus some contorted system. That's just my point. I'll be very politically, positive about it.
Okay.
I was just more describing that just radio spectrum is something that's broad and freely available. It's just not so many people realize it's that hard to play with. It's pretty straightforward. And if more literacy on this would basically vastly change the sorts of technologies that we build. We wouldn't basically be looking on licensed radios from Qualcomm chips we had in short supply controlled by a small number of mobile vendors that with an operating system with 40 layers of integration with, God knows what on the libraries. It'd just be more of, hey, I've got a pile of wires, and when we cut it out to this length and distance and we put it into this shape, I can communicate with everyone on this side of the city. And look, we've essentially got 20 of these as repeaters in the major hills. And congratulations, you now have a nationwide deployment network. It's not that fucking hard.
The Wall Street Journal's number 2 article today with this one that a bipartisan Senate bill, those are very rare words these days, set to unveil on Thursday, that's today. So both sides, the left and the right, the Republicans and the Democrats, came together to unveil something today that would ban internet platforms from favoring their own products or services, known as self-preferencing. And that has everything to do with the popular article 24 hours ago that an investigation finds Amazon places its own brands above competitors, even those with higher ratings and more sales, despite telling Congress otherwise.
Oh, they got them.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about antitrust. So if you're a marketplace, forget the sheer size of Amazon. The data, the juicy data you have on what's flying through or flying off the shelves, as it were, you've got all that information. You've got profile information about the consumers, and now, which products are selling really well? Let's start making some of these products. Hey, all right. So now we are competing with our suppliers. That used to be called antitrust. And so this is just a means to make it more fair, but I think it's great that we're starting to just have a reawakening of the concept of playing fair in the market.
So the next one's from Nikkei Japan. TSMC says it will build its first plant in Japan, focused on 22 nanometer and 28 nanometer chips becoming operational in 28. That means car chips, basically, for the Japanese car companies. The next one's New York Times. Facebook sets some internal message boards to private, including discussions on platform safety and election integrity. So let's restate that more clearly. Facebook is turning internal message boards that their employees use to private, and for the teams who actually work in platform security and election integrity. And the question is, should the teams inside of Facebook who work on election integrity and platform safety keep those conversations that they're having kind of private to themselves and the necessary people in Facebook out of the 100,000 people who work there? Should the janitor have access to the conversations that the election integrity team is having? Or should those conversations be only be had amongst the people for whom Facebook feels they should have access to? Limiting which employees have access to the groups that were previously public inside of Facebook, and now they're going to restrict who has access to the election integrity conversations to the people who actually work on that stuff and are directly related to it. The next one from The Verge. Twitter begins testing ads directly in replies after the first, third, or eighth reply to a tweet. Oh, shit. So now it's not only ads in the tweets, in your tweet feed or stream, where it's usually the second or third tweet that you see is actually not a real organic tweet. It's an ad. Now you're going to see ads in the replies.
Ooh.
Oh, boy. Good times.
By the way, just throwing this out there, we are literally breaking human-to-human communication in order to make this basically work better for corporate advertising. It's interesting because, and that's not necessarily like a bad thing, but over time it lowers people's expectation and their bar of expectation of quality of what's possible. We are scratching the surface of essentially the range of possibilities of how rich communications could be. As long as we have to dumb it down to the simplest element that advertising can support, we're never going to get these communication systems into what they can actually be for their final forms. And I really wish we'd have more essentially on this, really pushing essentially the limits, because this is getting kind of old.
In a related article today from Reuters, Twitter debuts new ad features, revamped algorithm ahead of e-commerce push. Twitter on Tuesday rolled out new ad features and revamped the algorithm that decides which ads users see to improve your click rate, as part of an effort to lay the groundwork to launch future e-commerce features, the social network company told Reuters. The new features come as Twitter's pushing to grow its performance advertising business, a strategy that aims to quickly generate sales and constitutes currently just 15% of Twitter's business for last year. The effort could help Twitter reach its goal of doubling annual revenue by 2023. The San Francisco company is positioning itself to eventually allow brands to sell products through the services by first improving on its ability to show users relevant ads and increasing the likelihood they will click that ad. Performance ads are a very large opportunity that's untapped for us. Yep. So they're going to improve the ability to match the ad with the viewer, because then they're going to start adding products, which are a variation of ads. And then when people have products, they got to match those products with the people who are likely to buy them, because that's their future and they know it. They need to they're going to become an e-commerce platform. And there's going to be all kinds of products that people are going to be selling on their Twitter profiles and making money from those purchases. You're going to have cute little Twitter stores all over Twitter. Same with Pinterest, same with TikTok, same with Snapchat, same with all of them. They're all, here it comes. I've been saying it since the first episode of Tech News Around the World 6 months ago. Here comes the social commerce in a very big way. The next one is from The Verge. Activision announces the Ricochet anti-cheating system for Call of Duty. So they're figuring out everyone who's ever used Call of Duty knows there's a whole lot of bots that give people an unfair advantage, and now they're going to crack down on all that. That's all you need to know. The next one from Engadget. Facebook says it is expanding its less political news feed test to 75 new countries for a total of more than 80. Facebook is slowly expanding its effort to weed out political content from the news feed. The company is now testing its less political feed in 75 new countries, Facebook said in an update. Next.
So that's big because the amount of money spent in election years, it's in the billions, right? I mean that's a big. They are stepping up.
Hang on.
Okay, sorry.
Hold. It says less political, not no political. I think what they're doing is they're going to remove the unpaid political content first.
Okay. So this is the retweeting of something that they saw or something, or I don't know. Yeah, we can only hope that consciousness emerges in some souls. Don't clip that, damn it. Fuck, don't clip it.
TikTok now lets live creators, meaning streamers, live streamers, mute specific viewers for up to an entire live stream, and says it has removed 81 million videos that violated its terms of service in Q2. The real news here is they have this clever, cute way when you're live streaming to mute dumbasses and jackasses. Those are technical terms. That who might be leaving stupid comments in your live feed. And this just happened in Twitch in a very big way. They're called hate rates because people are making bots. And these bots go into the live streams and start spouting KKK nonsense. And it's hurting the feelings of those Twitch streamers. This was a very big headline about 2 weeks ago. So, TikTok knows, and I'm starting to sense that these platforms are intentionally attacking each other with bots in their comment sections of their live streams to scare away their creators. And the Twitch streamers were boycotting. They had a day off of Twitch to stop the hate raids, the negative people, which I'd be curious to know who was the real source of those hate raids. And who benefited in it, because there's a huge competition for those live stream creators. And so TikTok is getting into live streaming. They've made a way for their creators to mute anyone who's spouting stupid shit in their tweets, in their live streams. You got to do it. That's just the hygiene these days. Or else you're going to get furious that somebody's, dropping all kinds of crazy crap in your live stream. So you got to be able to...
Why can't, just like we have these little filters, right, of like a privacy or these other settings with regards to, hey, I don't want any swear words in my experience with you. Why is it so difficult to add that feature? And maybe it's there. I'm just going to start twitching, in fact, so I got to dive in to make sure I look all around it. But I mean, that sounds like a pretty straightforward, it's freaking text, man. It's freaking pulling keywords, right? To filter microaggression crap from your stream. It's just this begging these social platforms to do just the minimal amount of control features to help filter and someone's stream. I think would be just a wonderful feature to have.
What's going to be really nice when we get to AR and we're walking around the town and we can mute, all the idiots who are spouting nonsense. You just boop. I can't hear you talking your bullshit. Just mute whoever you want. And, you're wearing your AirPods and you say, hey, AirPods, mute that dumbass over there. I don't want to hear anything coming out of that person's mouth.
Mute bombs. Yeah. I love it.
Mute you, fuck you. Mute, boom. Can't hear nothing you're saying.
I grew up with this, actually. Like we had something called, I grew up in a very conservative household. We had something called TV Guardian, and essentially, we went to have, unchristian words entering into our house. So there's this little device you plug into the television. It reads essentially the closed caption feeds, and if there's a bad word coming out, it'll just mute all the audio in real time, making sure you don't have to hear unchristian words. What was really interesting about this, the nuance, is that it was very hair triggery. And the things it would trigger on actually acted as sort of a whitelist or blacklist of essentially, because you realize there's ways you could basically trigger it without basically being very careful about when you're doing the pausing and such, where it actually acted as a whitelist to figure out of like, wait, there's a bunch of bad words I didn't know about earlier with things. So you reverse engineer the thing. It was the reason that I found it interesting is it's growing up, essentially the far left was this bastion of like, free speech forever kind of thing. Oh man, those theocrats, those Christian right far south groups are basically, that's where they basically protect, they keep people like sheltered from new ideas. It's really weird being coming now from more of the spending more time in Silicon Valley for the later part of my career, and then looking at adopting these censorship things at scale with abandon, even more so than essentially the stuff I grew up with. It's astounding watching the change of values and how much that shifts. It's going to backfire. And I can tell you, because it's essentially the same thing that's happening on the conservative side will happen on the far left if they adopt these same principles at scale. It's just going to take a little bit longer.
Twitter.
Well, the far right, quite frankly, has been very, to the point of legislating how not only the left can share thoughts via Hollywood and movie content, but also how the left lives their lives. So I mean, this is just interesting times, I guess, is another way to put it.
But if Twitter already has a keyword mute function where you won't see any particular words that you don't want to see, and what happens when we bring that to AR and you can tell your AirPods, I don't want to hear these are the list of words I never want to hear from anybody in any conversation I'm having.
Now imagine you have the ability to say that idea should not exist, that political group should not exist. Let's make sure that we update everyone for everyone's safety, that essentially they do not hear that thing that would disrupt essentially the
but this is the weird thing. You're making your own artificial reality. You're putting yourself in your own little filter bubble. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but how about the countries that, I mean, we keep going back to Congress and the privacy rights. What about the countries that work with our big tech to basically censor, what they see on Google and Facebook
Great
and
point.
et cetera? Think about them when they have all of this big data and they're making, decisions and saying this is what's going to be, the propaganda we're going to spew to our citizens.
Yep. Yeah. Well, by the way, China there was a headline this week. China's now going to require that all media in all of China is only state-backed media. No more private-owned media of any kind, or even invest. Not only owned, you can't even invest.
This gets back to my point of just the emergence of this perception of reality and how perception is exactly what you're saying. It's a whole new system of how our minds, we are cyborgs, and the control. It's not just like, hey, can I passively do this and this? No, these little subtle things, the microaggressions that Tyler was just talking about, their impact emotionally, the crap on Instagram for targeting teenage girls. Just all these different things are affecting and changing who we are. We don't have this concept of free will is just gone. Free will is gone.
There's an interesting difference, which is in the China case, it's the filter is based on the state's desires of what people get to hear and not hear, and in the Western version, it's the individual controls what they don't want to hear. In both cases, you're creating a kind of artificial reality. Anyway, just a wild thought. So the next one is Facebook now counts. Oh, I skipped over one. I'm sorry. The next one is Apple says a virtual event will be held Monday, October 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific, where they will reveal the new MacBook Pros 14 and 16 inch with the M1X chips and the AirPod 3 and maybe more. Who knows? The next one is Facebook says it now counts activists and journalists as involuntary public figures to help protect them and will remove sexual content targeting celebrities. Facebook said it will remove severe sexualizing content targeting public figures, including celebrities.
Oh, that's evil. What they're going to do is they're going to monetize it because they're going to say, hey, celebrities, you want to be in our program to make sure that you're not basically uploaded against this list. You should make sure you're authenticated with their program.
Ooh. Well, it's really, as the way
It'd be unfortunate if something were to happen.
Yeah, the way they describe
Just
it.
saying.
By the way, 60 Minutes, which is America's kind of big Sunday night news program where they do a deep dive on a different topic each week, and that they had the whistleblower a week ago, and this week they did a whole deep dive on deep fakes. and it was all about. They said that one of the most common primary use cases of deepfakes today is making celebrity porn, where they take a celebrity's face and they put it on porn actors and da da da. So Facebook says it will start removing sexualized attacks on celebrities. I think we understand.
Are we calling that an attack?
Yeah, well, all of this. It's we're on the brink of a new era of deepfakes, and it's going to be a whole lot of sexualized deepfakes. And yeah, Facebook's going to have to do something about that. You're going to have a whole lot of offended people.
This is your hourly notice that Chris has a burner phone and now a disguise on his profile.
So they're adding celebrities and journalists and activists, anyone who becomes a public figure, including politicians and whatnot.
Oh, they are going to get so fucked over this policy. So all right. So there's a. All right, one of the things I did early on with things is when some of the earlier algorithms were thing. I don't want to go into that. Right, so sorry, but the short version is they are really missing the mark on this, because here's the thing. What they should be doing, if they're trying to prevent that activity from occurring, what they should be doing is working with the casting agencies specifically and law enforcement. If they're trying to make it as basically an opt-in program and saying that this is basically a policy thing, it's going to come back to backfire, because what's going to happen is they're going to get sued by those groups for saying I was covered versus I wasn't covered. If they aren't actively having those groups crafting the policy, they're going to try to muscle in for it later, and that's going to be a PR disaster. That's I've like the term.
Well, what if the celebrity became a billionaire from releasing a porn film, like Kim Kardashian?
Well, there's only two companies that own like all the porn companies. It's like MindGeek and like one other one in Europe or something. So I mean, like, it's a very small number of groups to negotiate on this one. The thing that's more damaging is the fact that when the political groups basically say you can't have a deepfake of something. Now here's the crazy part. Most people don't understand this, but deepfakes essentially to date are one of the most efficient compression technologies known to man. It's just that most of the researchers that are working on it don't necessarily realize that quite yet. So what's going to be very strange about this is when they basically say, oh, you can't compress that, you can't basically do the thing. There's also these other aspects where, like, just a few days ago, essentially some researchers actually revealed something kind of interesting, where if you have a large enough data set to compare against, you can actually reverse engineer the original training data set from a collection. Now, the reason why this is very, very crazy is that this was thought to be that when you basically have a trained data set, it was thought that takes a layer of anonymity. It's in the black box. No one can get the thing back out. Because look at it. Look how much smaller that trained data set is. We take gigabytes of data. We compress in this 10 megabyte model, and somehow it's always able to pick out which one's the dog, which one's the cat, or which one's the cancer, which one's not. It doesn't matter that you train it on all these other, like, on very, very personal data. The end result is it basically just works. Well, here's the thing. The researchers have figured out how to get things back out. And the reason why it's very relevant is, as an example, for the title of the paper is great. They said this person may actually exist, which is kind of a meme off of this person does not exist for the online site you can go to where you can get an instant deep fake for anything. What they did is they actually compared the celebrity face set data with this new technique against another data set of celebrities. And what they were able to do is actually redraw out the original training data set of exactly which celebrities were in the thing from the exact poses and such. It's almost like a brute force technique. It's actually really interesting for how they did it. But the reason why this is very interesting is that when you look at groups like Google saying we should have access to all of the medical data in the United Kingdom because we can not only anonymize that data set, but if we could train an AI model on it, that AI model will be able to make medical decisions, and it will basically be something that's efficient because essentially it's also anonymous. Well, it turns out that a lot of data sets that are currently uploaded on GitHub used for all these AI models, turns out you can reverse engineer the original training set for all of them. So when the security researchers figure out the implications of what probably take about a month or two for basically someone to build like a prototype of this, what that's going to mean is there's going to be a shift in business models of what's considered to be something you can actually build for that versus basically training out. And I don't think people realize that deepfakes are just scratching the surface. If you're looking at celebrity porn, I almost use that as a marker for, okay, you see the flashy thing that gets the headlines. There is a much farther, deeper amount of issues that are essentially coming from this that are much more or fundamental to the nature of what information theory is than just, okay, someone can make a porn face of it. It's going to be fascinating to watch this public get massive education on this. I hope it's more successful than how we taught everyone biology and epidemiology so quickly.
Chris, Kim Kardashian was sarcasm, so. But that
So
was a good answer.
Glenn Greenwald, who's a
A key
journalist, made a really interesting tweet out of this article. The
PR rep.
The Reuters version of this headline says, exclusive, Facebook to change rules on attacking public figures on its platform, which now includes journalists. And he says, to appease the endless campaigns of journalists to pressure Facebook to censor more, Facebook is now adding journalists to the public figure category, meaning the freedom to criticize journalists and engage in activism against their work will be sharply curtailed. Of course, journalists are public figures. They chose a job that enables them to shape public discourses, ruin reputations, manipulate public perceptions, and so much else. He himself is a journalist, by the way. That they should be shielded from public critique is deranged, but it's a pervasive view they now have. Journalists have been increasingly equating any criticisms of them with harassment or bullying. So often, if a journalist publishes a false or defamatory article and people object, they cast themselves as the victims. Facebook's rules change reflects this self-pitying view. One could call this the Taylor Lorenz syndrome, who is the social media journalist at the New York Times. So many journalists go around casually ruining the lives and reputations of even private, powerless, obscure people, then instantly claim they're the real victim when the people object to that and critique their work. It's an interesting point.
It's the cost of influence, right? It's kind of the cost of influence. I mean, those journalists also open up their account and all of a sudden have 10, 50, 100,000 plus, followers or something like that.
Well, here's the thing: when journalism was about journalizing, like just recording just recording what happened neutrally in an unbiased way and reporting it. Journalists didn't so much get in a whole lot of hot shit in normal democracies with freedom of press. So but now journalists are becoming activists and doing hit pieces at a steady clip. And they still want the protection of not getting punched back in the face. When you're intentionally trying to sabotage and sink a private company and economically sabotage and kill a startup, and you don't think somebody's going to call you out and and point out the errors of your logics, and then claim that you're being harassed by this is what's happening, by the way, for those who don't know. And this is why he mentions Taylor Lorenz, because the likes of Taylor will write these hit pieces on tech startups, and then the geeks
conveniently basically go and enforce the interests of the groups that pay for their advertising bills.
Well, but this happened with Coinbase, for example, where when these tech journalists who are acting like activists who are sabotaging startups or sometimes bigger tech companies, and then the tech geeks who are the entrepreneurs and investors, who are generally a lot smarter than the journalists, honestly, fight back and flex and show who actually is in control of things on many fronts. Then the journalist says, "Oh, I'm being attacked. I'm being harassed by big tech." I was, oh me, oh my. It's like, well, you're not doing journalism, so you're not going to get the traditional journalism protections. If you were doing legit journalism, you wouldn't deal with this negative blowback consequences that you're now feeling from these tech companies that you're attacking. End of rant.
Journalists are perceived to be too close to people in power, that they aren't able to be objective anymore. Then they cease to be listened to. And that's probably one of the things essentially of a long-term tradition with things. There should have been more people protesting newspapers being shut down in their local neighborhoods with stuff. But the fact is that in many groups and many municipalities, they basically had gotten too close. And so they left themselves vulnerable to essentially tech giants basically taking over and replacing all their ad revenue and everything. So that was something that happened historically. But if you're seeing essentially the same pattern happen again, that's a sign that there's going to be a new entrance for basically new groups that basically they're going to be listened to more so than essentially the current crop of people that are trusted to basically review the world.
So hang on. So a couple things. One is not all journalists have those nefarious goals. And
nope.
so
but it's kind of stupid that you felt the need to point that out. Nobody said all journalists. I said the likes of Taylor Lorenz. There's millions of journalists. I'm talking about
Well,
10.
it's not stupid. It's not stupid for me to point this out
It
because there
is.
is a need.
But to say
So
not
look.
all journalists do that, that's stupid. I'm not saying all journalists do that.
Okay, so the other thing is just with Web 2.0, absolutely everybody has a microphone. Everybody. So as we go into these Clubhouse or whatever, everybody can share their opinion, right? So guess what, everybody? There are a whole bunch of people in our society that have not just different opinions, they have dramatically different opinions on the left and on the right, right? So anyways, I just wanted to bring that up, and
That's not really I'm sorry, I'm sick. But wait, are you still talking, Dave? Because I'm not
no, no,
sure
no,
if
no. I'm
I'm sorry.
driving. Go ahead.
I didn't know if you cut off or something. But the
Oh, Alessandro, what happened to your voice?
She just said
I
she's
have a
sick.
cold.
Oh
Yeah, I'm
no.
sick. Sorry.
Get well
But
soon.
thank you. The reason that everybody has a voice, honestly, is this is the legacy of Section 230. This idea that platforms do not want to intercede or even comment on anything that's said on the platform because they're terrified of breaking their own liability protection with Section 230. That's the platform protection, right? If you're basically all you are is the medium, but you're not doing anything to moderate, you get a sort of legal shield that isn't even a a real legal shield, but it is, does have a lot of protection in it. And it's the legacy of an act that is basically doesn't even exist anymore, except for that one section. So I think changes are coming. There's a lot of proposed bills. There's 5 proposed bills actually to change it right now. But until that happens, the problem is, if you don't moderate, or at least say somebody has, it's just an opinion and not reason, like this isn't factual, this is just opinion. The problem is that right now we don't have a bunch of people who are trained in critical thought. That sounds really condescending. I don't mean it that way. I just mean that there's so much information now that I think there's a generation of people that are no longer able to test to try
we all agree
to
on that.
understand things.
I'm with you on that. Evan has some breaking news here. Microsoft to shut down LinkedIn in China as internet censorship increases in the country.
Unbelievable.
What did they get cloned with?
That's a key question.
Who is their local development partner?
That's legit.
What are the recruiters going to do in China?
Yeah, Microsoft to shut down LinkedIn in China as the internet. Microsoft will shut down LinkedIn in China as it faces harsher internet censorship in the country. The company will launch a China-specific version of LinkedIn later this year.
Of course they will.
Okay, all right. So that's the next
There we
step.
go.
They're gonna clone themselves. There you go. Because they knew if they don't, someone else will.
Get market access. That's why they're there. Market access, and then they're asked to leave after they've launched a competitor that can attack them from across the ocean.
I wonder where the data from that. Yeah, I wonder if the data on that platform is going to be hosted on the sovereign cloud.
Well, for those who don't know, the headline that inspired this new breaking news headline was last week. It was revealed that some people found out that their profile doesn't exist in China. LinkedIn exists in China, but not everybody's profile exists in China. Some profiles magically don't appear. And it turns out those people who don't appear generally have something on their profile that cannot appear inside of China. Like there's some mention of Tiananmen Square in their profile, or I'm having a memory lapse in recalling the examples that were given in the article by the people who were
journalists.
Yeah, there was some, and maybe they don't want people in China being able to contact those journalists and what have you. But Microsoft announced Thursday it will shut down its local version of LinkedIn in China as the country continues to expand its censorship of the internet. LinkedIn was the last major U.S.-operated social network still operating in China, which has some of the strictest censorship rules. Social media platforms and websites like Twitter and Facebook have been blocked for more than a decade, while Google decided to shutter operations in 2010, which is also a decade, CNBC. Microsoft said it would shut down LinkedIn due to significantly more challenging operating environment and greater compliance requirements in China. And instead, Microsoft will launch a job search site in China that doesn't have LinkedIn's social media features. The news comes after Chinese internet regulator told LinkedIn in March to better moderate its content and gave them a 30-day deadline, the Wall Street Journal reported Thursday. Last month, LinkedIn blocked...
30 days?
Yeah.
You want to shut down essentially a platform used by how many hundreds of millions of people and relaunch it essentially
It's
with
six. I actually looked it up. They're the number 11 country of use in LinkedIn. It's
Wow.
about 6 million people in it compared
Yes,
to
there's
I think
business,
it's
there's
like
politics. Can we should have
it's
shine a prayer, right? A
111
little
in
prayer
the
counter for that
million in the
poor.
US.
I'll tell
We
you.
light a poor candle for that poor database administrator that has to update the tables and columns and rows and migrate that database while everyone's breathing down his neck. That poor fellow. He has 30 days to back up all the servers and everything.
Last month, LinkedIn blocked several U.S. journalists in China, citing prohibited content in their profiles. Profiles of academics and researchers have also been reportedly blocked on the platform in China in recent months. LinkedIn launched in China in 2014 with limited features designed to adhere to stricter internet laws in the country. The new site, called InJobs, will not include a social feed, also or allow users to share posts or articles. Data from search firm Statista suggests that China is the company's third largest market. In July, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said LinkedIn contributes about $10 billion in annual revenue. Microsoft acquired LinkedIn in 2016 for $26 billion. So, by the way, I imagine America is applauding this move, and in fact probably was very much encouraging LinkedIn to abandon China for fear that China is using LinkedIn to try to recruit the smartest minds of each category and to engage with them. And as Harvard professors have been known to, and the Ivy League professors everywhere are constantly approached by Chinese.
Quick little thing.
Yes.
I gotta say this. History time. 8-nation alliance basically goes through Boxer Rebellion and basically kicks China's ever-living ass. They humiliated them. This is basically center of humiliation. Every country asked for war damages, very much similar to essentially end of Versailles. America is something different from every other country. It's Teddy Roosevelt. He said, instead of basically you paying us a war debt type thing and paying off essentially us basically beating you, we're going to set up a scholarship, and your debt to us is send us your best and brightest, and we'll train them in how Western world works, and we'll send them and the best and brightest back, and essentially we'll have this as a cultural exchange. That tradition has been around for almost 100 years and has only recently begun to basically be break down. And it's really interesting, essentially, when that has basically become an active channel for espionage and essentially something that basically is a flashpoint between essentially the countries, because that is a very old one. It's interesting watching as geopolitics shift. There's a long running tradition behind that. It's more than just the current headlines.
Do we think it's the espionage link though? I think it's probably more to do with the uncontrolled news feed. You know, China at the moment is trying to tighten up on external information. You know, information on what's going on in China. I mean, there are so many things going on in China at the moment that the state's trying to control. I sort of think that potentially LinkedIn doesn't have the same level of controls as other social media online portals or websites like Facebook. So they can't restrict access to the posts, and the posts contain information. And if you're trying to control the narrative, that's probably the reason for this decision. Because if they're going to try and target Western diplomats or scientists, they can just set up accounts on LinkedIn on the main service, not the Chinese service, and do that anyway.
Yeah, but in order to do that, they'd have to go through a VPN, because you just can't access the main service in China. You have to set it up on LinkedIn. You used to have to set it up in LinkedIn.cn, and it's sort of interesting because I was talking to a couple of my friends in China yesterday.
Renee, we're
So
losing
going
you.
down.
Matrix, right? Everybody
Yeah.
That's all right.
I just want to correct the statistics that I just gave, though. Those are old. China is 52 million to 174 million in the US. But the statistics on LinkedIn are super interesting. If you guys have ever looked at those things, there's like who's on it and everything. And I bet it shifted from people who are in their 30s and 40s and senior people to becoming more of a social media platform. And you can see that because most of the users are between 24 and 34, 25 and 30, whatever that category is, 25 and 34, whatever that one. So most of the users are there now. So I bet that's probably a factor, at least, because that's the rowdy people are in that category.
A potentially related article somebody in the audience just sent me, and thank you to, I'll just shout them out. Who was that? FTI is their Twitter account. I don't know who that is in the audience, but the article headline says California Military Department to conduct school security assessments to safeguard schools in the state of California from cyber threats. A recently enacted law will allow the California Military Department to conduct independent security assessments to identify any weaknesses because of additional heightened threats of cyber attacks on schools, American schools. Why and who's attacking American schools? Cyber attacking American schools.
Is it ransomware or is it cyber attacks?
Cyber attacks.
Ooh, can we play Jeopardy?
As well, I don't have the answer in the article, but I don't think it's that difficult of a question when we look at where a lot of these cyber attacks come from.
I wonder if they're going to tie in with some of that ElsaGate stuff eventually with stuff. That stuff was creepy as hell. But like right now, essentially, you're still missing essentially a lot of the targeting information where to go for if you're not basically hijacking someone else's platform. Imagine if you could basically compromise Google's like Chromebook repository of like all the things that they basically have, or Kaggle, not Kaggle. There's another one that's popular with the kids these days. But like a lot of these basically district serviced startups, like Pearson's the largest company in the ed tech space. I mean, it's only a few $1 billion essentially as a company. So essentially, they have very small budgets, and they spend very little amounts on their cybersecurity. It's the sort of data sets that aren't terribly valuable in the immediate context, but essentially they grow more valuable with time. So essentially, those kids eventually become like people in different positions of power, and have their own journeys through life and everything. You could just do a mass targeting of all those schools essentially in one go and start their profiles early. I mean, it probably gives you some interesting fuel for later.
So the next one is...
I just read an article that said... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just read an article that says like over 60% are ransomware attacks. And it's exactly what Chris said. It's because they're super weak security and because the payout is much more likely. They get about 2.7 million per attack. So there's like a high payout, low security. I think that it's easy to attack them.
Yeah, so backup data for that. They actually looked at it and they said that it's, for the ransomware attack, it's $100 for that app on the dark web, and sometimes the payment is $2 million wired basically from the school districts.
Who's shown paying in February the 2020. Insurance on that?
I don't know. It's like this one.
See, if they NFT'd that app, they could get a continuing revenue stream from their ransomware.
The dark web. NFT.
They already do get a cut of the bounty on those ransomware for a service. So the next one is...
They have professional customer service, I've heard, with stuff that's quite impressive.
Up to 70% of Instacart's quote-unquote workers in the U.S. and Canada could walk off the job this weekend, demanding at least a 10% default tip, commissions, and pay by order instead of pay by job, so to speak. Because sometimes you get multiple orders in one job to multiple customers, and they want to be paid for each order, so they're not getting 3 orders simultaneously. And so we'll see. I guess we'll get an update.
We're about to see if negotiation works when you control all of the platform.
Yeah. The next one from TechCrunch, London-based point of sale, which is called the POS in the biz.
Point of sale, piece of shit, essentially, depending on who's doing the maintenance.
Yeah, point of sale provider SumUp acquires 5 stars, which offers loyalty marketing, payments, and other services to small merchants for $317 million. Tel Aviv-based Karma, which offers AI-powered online shopping tools to save money, raises $25 million. Tala, which offers mobile-first financial services in emerging markets, raises 145, and GitLab raises 801 million. In Q2 of 2021, Apple captured 75% of the overall handset market operating profit. So 75%.
That's Apple for you.
Yeah. And 40% of revenue.
And they sweep up all the cash.
This is interesting stats. So in the second quarter of 2021, April, May, June, Apple captured 75% of the overall handset profits and 40% of the revenue, despite accounting for only 13% of global smartphone shipments. So
does that include the Google search partnership or just the hardware sales?
That's a good question.
Because that's like 15 billion or so that they throw in there. That can be a significant part, depending on how you count it.
Yeah. The next one from the Daily Mail UK judge rules in favor of a woman who claimed her neighbor's Ring doorbell breached her privacy, potentially paving the way for similar lawsuits. Your Ring doorbell is violating my privacy, and I'm suing you, and I'm winning.
Can you imagine essentially drawing up a list of the customers? Because I think that database leaked at one point. Can you imagine drawing up a list of the customers and drawing a cone from across the street and then going, well, here's like the field of view. I'm going to basically class action lawsuit, call up essentially each one of the people or send a mail to each of the neighbors across the street saying, your privacy might have been violated. Talk to your doctor if you've been violated by mesothelioma, except it's like, talk to your lawyer if you need to basically sue essentially Amazon because there's a class action. You may be... That could get insane.
The man may have to pay.
That would destroy Ring.
It's $150,000 payment to the neighbor.
It would just cause them to basically get some nice football game sponsorships for the local politician groups. It's like, hey, you wouldn't want to regulate all these people essentially right now because you're popular.
Well, law enforcement relies heavily on Ring.
But who dictates where you... I don't have a Ring. Who dictates where you put the Ring? Isn't that the owners? Like the owner places it wherever they want it?
So there's a phrase in the legal textbook from heaven above to hell below, and this is basically dictate the rights of property law essentially for whether or not when you buy a piece of property or when you lease it, whether or not essentially the crown gives it to you with things. And this is basically there's a Latin version of that phrase from heaven above to hell below. Now, what's interesting as time went on is that basically started to be modified to be like, well, mineral rights are different when you're going mining. It's going underneath your property. That's not to hell below. That's just going to be stop like maybe like 100 meters below your property or something, or 30 or something. Then it became, well, mineral rights are different from the state. And then it said, well, we've got flyover things, so these aircraft are new things. So also it wasn't to heaven above. Your property right bubble essentially is like, well, up until airspace and depending on your region. Now, what's interesting is that when we were talking about the types of rights you can have with property, this also extends in other areas to things they started saying whether or not you have sunlight rights for essentially for saying, someone can't build a tall building right next to you and cast shadow on your property, or essentially noise and other things. And so what's interesting is the number of rights you have as a property owner has changed dramatically over time. What's going to be really interesting is if you starting to have versions of this where it's not just whether you're not casting shadows on a building or whether or not you're essentially saying it's like whether you're flying over drones or something like that. It's going to be whether or not essentially there's essentially an inherent right to privacy for whether or not cameras are aimed at the property or from the property to your neighbors. That's going to get to be really dicey. And like all good, wonderful things about case law, it'll be a case-by-case basis, which will be obnoxious and not be consistent. And then there's going to be some Supreme Court thing. It'll go back and forth, and then eventually we'll have like a half thing, and people will be going to the next thing. But
that cone though of your ownership that varies based on your jurisdiction. Even like in Canada, you don't have the rights to the minerals. There are lots of jurisdictions that have very different rights of that stuff. But for this, my question really is, if the owner is the person who physically decides and places the camera where it goes, how is Ring responsible for the image that is relayed if someone is putting it and not checking to make sure that they're not taking in stuff like in the bedroom or whatever? Like I don't really think that. I mean, I would take this. I'd appeal that decision, and I don't think that
Ring isn't responsible
unless Ring tells you where to put it.
No, Ring's not responsible. The owner of the house is the one who has to pay the fine.
Yeah,
Now
I
it'd be
mean,
interesting if Amazon reimburses them for that or something crazy like that.
no, but that's actually, I mean, that makes sense. That's the same thing as like nuisance laws and things like that. Like if you want to put a spotlight, like our floodlight, on your property, you have to be sure that it is not impeding the quiet enjoyment, and that's actually what it's called in the US, the quiet enjoyment of your neighbors. Because if it is, and they ask you to stop, like they can say like, hey, your floodlight's shining in, and you actually have to do something to mitigate it. Otherwise, you're creating a nuisance to them. So, like, that's the thing, is that your rights end when someone else's rights start. So, I mean, I guess it's the house that is liable for it, but I think that there's something that needs to be said for, like, to people that you have the right to protect your property, but not when it impedes someone else's right. Like, you don't get to put like spikes on fences, and you can't use like that, what is that fence stuff, where the barbed wire thingy on it. You can't do that. You can't. There's a lot of stuff that you can't do to protect property. So, I mean, I think it's very strange that most people think that they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, because, I don't know, they live in the US or whatever. Like, the law has never been like that. That's never been our rights.
2 quick points.
Alexander, what's
FCC has a thing
You
with
can in
essentially for
Thailand.
quick thing. FCC essentially had a thing where they were HOAs, which were very racist in origin, by the way. Basically, were formed to essentially, and they have a thing where you couldn't put satellite dishes or communications equipment on your house. FCC got involved and said, we're going to intervene in this as a federal matter and say that essentially, as long as they conform to essentially this regulation standard, that you cannot basically ban people from putting communication equipment on their house. And this was one of the things that basically rolled out a lot of microwaves, satellite dishes, and other sorts of things. And that was essentially that was very important for rolling out that infrastructure. I can see the sort of thing that might occur where essentially you might have a lot of jurisdictions making very, very different interpretations of this sort of privacy sort of thing as it evolves. And you might end up having like a sort of nationwide type kind of position that ends up having from one of the regulators. One other point to put out, essentially, we're talking about active denial. Again, this is trivial to implement from a technological standpoint. It's not even an economic thing. It comes down to whether or not people are pissed off enough to do something about it. When you're talking about $5 jamming devices that break all electronics and communications, IoT devices, GPS, etc., and basically 100-meter radius for $5, similar versions exist for your front door. If you want to say, hey, you've got a ring thing on your front door, that's cute. I have a little discount LiDAR scanner that's a little different from the one you have on your self-driving car. This one just has the laser, and instead of basically pointing in every direction and giving you a return for distance, it just basically hits the returns where it detects a glimmering light from a camera and just stays stuck on it, which basically actively denies and fries your chip right there. Now, you can do that as like a low voltage just to basically blind it, or you could crank it up and destroy it. Now, that device essentially is something that costs about $100 right now, and it'll be about $5 essentially within the next 5 years, essentially as prices come down for the commodities. These sorts of components and pieces are going to be littered throughout the environment. It's not going to be something that requires a special anarchist person to basically dream up. It's just going to be something discount that you buy in bulk from and by the tens of thousands in a shipping container that comes in from some manufacturer in Mexico or China, and it's just something the kids have. And I think the thing that people don't take into account when they look at these rights and these property laws and all of these social issues is that there are fundamental underlying issues in the structure that have nothing to do with the technology, and we are not properly articulating those things because we're trying to basically have technologists basically decide what social patterns should be. And I think that that's going to be a very backwards way of solving these issues that are ultimately community in nature.
But Chris, remember the common term says eye for an eye makes everyone blind? I have a funny feeling with all those lasers.
Well, this is a literal version.
Blind. Exactly.
Okay, so the next one is a company called Junie, a neobank catering to not everybody. This is not a bank for everybody. It's a specific bank to a specific niche. Banking for e-commerce and online marketing companies. Raises $73 million from one of my very, 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 very number one best buddy, dearest friends, Ted Pearson at EQT Ventures, who's a sponsor of my events. And they're from Sweden. And it says in this article, we In the extension round, power player EQT Ventures didn't want to miss out and stepped up to the plate. Other partners include DST Global, blah, blah, blah. On the decision to go big with Junie, EQT Ventures' Ted Pearson comments, Junie is the fastest growing fintech we've ever seen by a long stretch. The company has hit an impressive average weekly growth rate of 80% per week. Holy shit.
Holy shit.
And
Jesus.
we're
I mean, really? Wow.
And we're hearing great things from digitally native entrepreneurs. The fact that we've known Samir for a long time and rate him highly made the investment decision easy. We're excited to help Junie bring a new kind of credit product to the market, disrupting banking platforms for business. And some of you who've
80% per week, that's an understatement, saying it was a good decision to make.
The Ted, who made that comment, I've brought Ted into Tech News Around the World a couple times, but it's been a while, so I'll ping him.
Man, their LPs will be really happy with that. They can wrap the fund now with things with the one deal.
Yeah, they're on that one's got rocket-like potential. Let's see how far it could go. But the point is that these niche neobanks that focus on particular niches like content creators and LGBTQ and Black community and whatever, these are things that traditional banks really are not set up to do. So it's very interesting.
Weed banks are a big one. You're going to see those everywhere because that is very particular sorts of regulations they have to deal with.
A U.S. court filing details how fraudsters used AI to clone a company's director's voice to steal $35 million last year in the UAE. AI voice clone used in a huge heist in the UAE, according to Dubai investigators, amidst warnings of cyber criminals' use of voice print technology. And
Tyler, are you real?
I remember this story when it came out last year, before Tech News even opened, which was the heisters used a voice print of an executive, and they called the assistant and asked the assistant to log into this computer and transfer the money, and she did because she thought it was her boss.
It's the plot of Ocean's 15.
The next one from Bloomberg, Pinterest co-founder Evan Sharp, who works as its chief design and creative officer, and steps down to join Johnny Ive's new firm. And Johnny Ive is the design genius behind Apple ever since 2000, when those colored bubble iMacs came out, and Johnny kind of ran the show there design-wise until very recently. And now Johnny has departed Apple and created a new firm, the name of which was just announced recently. It's called Love From, one word. And now Evan from Pinterest has stepped down from his role at Pinterest as the chief design and creative officer to join Johnny at Love From. And I have to say, Evan spoke at my event and flew to Stockholm to join us, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And he is totally brilliant and just a very lovely dude and obsessed with design. No surprise if he's working with Johnny Ive. So the next one, Berlin-based company called MAID, M-A-Y-D, which aims to deliver medication for small pharmacies in under 30 minutes, raises 15 million euros. Here we go into the niche deliveries. Oregon-based.
Do you give the bike riders the medication to make them go faster?
Yeah, they might be getting high on their own supply, as they call it. Oregon-based Dutchy, which provides payment tools for cannabis dispensaries. There you go, Chris. Payment tools for cannabis dispensaries raises $350 million at a $3.7 billion valuation.
Future. I can call 20 minutes ahead of the headlines.
It was all in cash.
OutSchool, a marketplace for online after-school classes, raises $110 million at a $3 billion valuation. Beacon. Yes.
Wait, was that the weed headline or the kids? I get confused there. We went through them so quickly.
OutSchool, a marketplace for online after-school classes.
So like the non-China version.
Correct. Raises $110 at a $3 billion valuation. Beacon, which helps users build custom trading and risk management apps, raises $56 million. Facebook names Nicola Mendelssohn as VP of its global ad business. And Ohi, which offers e-commerce product delivery in under 20 minutes in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, LA, raises $19 million. Grin, which helps brands manage influencer marketing campaigns, raises $110. Payment processing and automation company Avid Exchange closes. Who cares? And Microsoft agrees to commission an independent human rights review of its law enforcement and government contracts in response to a shareholder proposal.
Whoa.
The shareholders are all up. They want an investigation to see if Microsoft's facial recognition systems have biases and whatnot, essentially.
Wait, but the $24 billion military contract, that's not covered under this because that might have cameras.
22.8 to that's right, and they've actually asked them to.
It has an extension on it, a 5-year extension that they can get.
No, but you're right. This, believe it or not, this group is saying they want Microsoft to walk back that government contract.
Okay.
To which Microsoft said, "Yeah, that's not how it works. Go ahead and sell your shares, homeboy." Yeah, we don't need you as an investor if you're going to be making crazy proposals like that. So,
hey Tyler.
Yes.
It's I just want to make a mention about OutSchool for anybody who hasn't checked it out. I've actually done a couple classes there for my middle schoolers. They've really tapped into a neat model. It's much more like master class-ish than it is. It made it sound like the way you explained it, probably how it was written in the story, made it sound like it was like some kind of after-school tutoring thing or something that was super kind of lame and boring. But the way they fashion their courses, it's very different than that. It'd be like, have Harry Potter and his friends, teach you how to do calculus. So or there's art and design and everything else anyway, but I really think they're onto something.
Cool. Well, they just raised money at a $3 billion valuation, so I would agree. They seem to be onto something.
That's on the same level of Pearson. The edtech sector is not very large. If they've raised that kind of round with stuff, that's one hell of a bet there. Okay. There aren't very many groups that can sell out to it. The other thing is an exit. So I mean, those investors, they're committed there.
Oh, and now that I just refreshed because we went through the big boring stories, and I refreshed my feed here, and now the top story is Wall Street Journal: Microsoft shutting down its Chinese version of LinkedIn and replaces it with a job board. Yes. Okay. And then there's the Apple news. Twitter begins testing ads.
Hey Tyler, just throwing this out there. So if you look through Microsoft with things, I grabbed their most recent thing they did for the military one. The military colonel or whoever that signed off on this thing or whatever, the thing that they're most excited about is this new concept for the military called soldier-centered design. Because these Microsoft guys, these tech whizzes, have figured out how to this concept of user-centered design, where you don't actually have a finished thing to a specification, but you build it based upon what people ask for, and you do it on the fly. And they're talking about this as the most exciting transformational thing that they've ever done. And they're going, they spent literally $22 billion on this to $24 billion to be told about a 16-year-old design practice from tech. It's like, oh, Millie. The video is fantastic if you want to see it. It's really eye-opening of what the current state of these things is.
So now we get into the tweets, like this one that just came in. The FTC says it will fine tech companies using fake reviews. The FTC sent a notice to hundreds of companies, including AT&T, Dunkin' Donuts, Hulu, and Macy's. Anyone who has reviews, the FTC says it is ready to hold companies that use fake reviews to account, including by seeking financial damages, according to an FCC announcement published today, Thursday. The rise of social media
Yelp
has blurred the line between authentic content and advertising. Well, and Yelp is the best example of that ever, leading to an explosion in deceptive endorsements across the marketplace. Fake online reviews and other deceptive endorsements often tout products throughout the online world. The announcement reads, the FTC has sent the notice to more than 700 companies, telling them they could face penalties up to $43,792 per violation for using fake reviews.
Holy hell.
I mean, are they just going to shut down Yelp now? because that's
Wait, Apple still uses them
it's
for
the
their local
entirety of
reviews because
Yelp.
Google bought out Zagat or whatever, right? So like Apple still sends the traffic to them. I wonder how much they have, like how long that contract was for, because I can tell you right now, whatever internal product team they have to clone or replace that is probably going to overdrive right now, going, "Oh shit."
Here's the quote: "Fake
Except,
reviews."
wait, didn't
Yep, fake
wait
review.
the FTC actually did that? Remember, they had an $11,000 fine per incident for do not call list.
They might
I
actually
don't.
enforce this one.
I don't think they have ever enforced it, so I'm not sure. I don't know how real that is.
They might. I don't
Here's the
know.
quote: "Fake reviews and other forms of
Wait,
deceptive
I'll
endorsement."
jump in on that. Do not, Alexandra. That there was a cottage growth of attorneys that were calling those companies and got a ton of settlements. My friend got a nice new boat out of that. So they may not have enforced it, but it definitely set up a cottage industry because it was had private enforcement.
Okay, boats. We need to have more boats out of the Yelp people.
So let me find that. It says, here's the quote: "Fake reviews and other forms of deceptive endorsement cheat consumers and undercut honest business." It says the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection in an announcement, advertisers will pay a price if they engage in these deceptive practices. The companies receiving the notice include huge American corporations like Activision, Blizzard, AT&T, Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts, Hulu, Macy's, Ralph Lauren, Sony, and Wendy's. Inclusion in the list is not an indication that the company has done anything wrong, but the FTC has sent the notice far and wide, including large companies and top advertisers, leading retailers, top consumer product companies, and major advertising agencies. An entire industry of so-called reputation management companies exists. While some may work legitimately, others may deploy inauthentic reviews to bolster a client's image. In other cases, they may work to try to remove negative reviews. Yep.
Amazon is so fucked.
The next one, the Verge is now doing a profile on the $499 HTC Vive Flow. Is for people who don't like VR. It says HTC wants to find a new VR market, but what is it? After years of focusing on business-only virtual reality, HTC is launching a $499 entertainment-focused headset called the Vive Flow in November, with pre-orders starting globally today. The new Vive Flow looks radically different from most HTC Vive devices.
They shut down multiple cell phone factories and put billions into a VR factory for this, so they really need to make this work.
Getting off of another window.
I got to mute John there. The Flow, which was leaked heavily before HTC's reveal today, is a compromise between capability and approachability. Two front-facing cameras handle inside-out motion tracking. Lightweight hardware is a big selling point, and you got to see the photos of it. It makes you look like you have this huge sunglasses on your face. They're kind of.
They didn't think the Magic Leap made you look nerdy enough, so they're like, "Wait, let's see how much we can go with that."
Yeah, they're kind of funky looking. Okay.
I think Magic Leap also had one of their new designs either leak or get announced with things, and they're kind of doing a more lightweight version. One more thing just to throw out there is the average time that people spend in a VR session is very important when you look at essentially about how valuable something like this is. The average time essentially used to be about 20 minutes, about the length of a Beat Saber session. The more recent and Oculus is of basically, I think average time actually goes up to 40 minutes to an hour. And a lot of it's very directly tied to ergonomics. One of the things that's very big about that flow is having the airflow going through, essentially keeping essentially the compartment cool and also basically keeping active airflow, because your eyes get very, very dry having constant basically photons aimed at them and everything with those screens right next to them. That dramatically increases the comfort time that you basically are willing to be comfortably in VR. Now, whether or not they've increased the screen resolution to a size that's actually going to basically be useful for long-term workloads is another thing, because that results in eye strain. But this should dramatically increase the time that people spend in VR, which means the amount of development time that they can actually enjoy experiences with. It's one of those like underlying metrics for like it's almost like if you're having engagement as an important part for a social media platform selling to advertising companies, the amount of time for ergonomics that a VR platform can be used for experiences is very much tied to the ergonomics. So that's just fun little things from the industry.
Okay, the next one is from Google analyzed 80 million ransomware samples. Here's what it found. Israel has submitted the largest amount of ransomware samples since the start of 2020, according to a study. Google has published a new ransomware report revealing Israel was far and away the largest submitter of samples during that period. The tech giant Google commissioned cybersecurity firm VirusTotal to conduct the analysis, which entailed reviewing 80 million ransomware samples from 140 countries. According to the report, Israel, South Korea, Vietnam, China, Singapore, India, Kazakhstan, Philippines, Iran, and the UK were the 10 most affected territories based on the number of submissions reviewed. Israel had the highest number of submissions, and that amount was near 600% increase from its base amount of submissions. The report did not state what Israel's baseline amount was. From the start of 2020, ransomware activity was at its peak during the first 2 quarters of 2020. Gand Crab had an extraordinary peak in Q1 2020. There was another sizable peak in July. According to the report, 95% of ransomware files detected were Windows-based executables, or DLLs, dynamic link libraries, and 2% were Android-based, so that's 97% right there. The report also found that exploits consisted of only a small portion of the samples. While big campaigns come and go, there is a constant baseline of ransomware activity that never stops. Yeah, so
like you know how people that don't get vaccinated essentially act as a reserve pool for the genetic version. Essentially, all of those Windows machines essentially that sit unpatched forever, basically spewing out malware, or misconfigured the machines. It's something that'll be with us for a very long time.
In what could be an ominous sign for other developing countries, Vietnam reports severe supply shortages from China, their neighbor there. Electronics retailers in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam's southern commercial hub. By the way, it's like 11 million people, as big as any American city, like, LA.
They have shopping malls 6 stories tall with electronics on every single surface. It's incredible.
So when you hear Ho Chi Minh City, think New York City. It's massive. Vietnam's southern commercial hub are reporting acute shortages of laptops, mobile phones, and other electronic devices imported from China. Logistics experts there say the disruptions are due to what's described as a perfect storm of supply chain disruption that could be a precursor to shortages in a number of essential product categories. Let's hope medicines aren't one of them, where China makes all of America's medicines. So, that could be very concerning indeed. The next one,
the fact that we're very quick to remind everyone else during negotiations.
Just another point on that. To underscore the critical importance of Ho Chi Minh City on regional development, lots of multinationals have relocated from China to Vietnam. So particularly with the tech equipment that they're not able to access, that could impact business operations throughout the region.
So the next one is from PBS, Public Broadcasting Service. Tennessee judge jailed minors on bogus charges following playground fights.
Another one?
A new investigation by ProPublica and Nashville Public Radio has uncovered an alarming pattern of arresting and detaining elementary school children.
Okay, there was another one essentially with Virginia. I think it was Virginia, essentially. I might be getting the state wrong. Essentially, a few years ago, I met one of the guys that was responsible for putting the judge in jail because of the amount of corruption on that. They reverted all the charges the guy had done across his entire career, which is astounding. If this is the second one, there's probably more than one or two. There's probably patterns here. That's crazy.
Essentially, at this point, police and judge were deciding on how the kid looked or how the kid was acting in the moment, whether they would be detained at the center. Yeah, something weird.
Wait, where is this? Is that in Pennsylvania?
Tennessee.
By any chance? Oh, because I mean the one I think that Chris is talking about was the Lucerne judge in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Lucerne, that was it.
Yeah, because the judges, the judges are actually involved in those private prisons. They get either kickbacks or some of them have direct investments in it. So it's really insane.
The dark side of capitalism right there. The next one is CSQ. sends this one in that Binance makes a clean break from China amid the Chinese cryptocurrency crackdown. Well, they have to because it's illegal to operate there. The world's biggest digital currency exchange will cease to offer peer-to-peer trading in mainland China because, CZ enjoys this thing called life. He loves this thing called living, so he's gonna comply. He knows
China doesn't murder people. They just send them out to labor camps and they get to grow cotton and build up projects
he knows
in Africa.
an existential threat when he sees one. Severing its final ties with a market it largely withdrew from a while back, but now it's fully cut all ties as they have to because it's now illegal to do that there. And then CSQ sends in this one from South China Morning Post that China faces cybersecurity talent shortage amid new data security rules. A Ministry of Industry of Information Technology report says China faces a shortage of highly skilled cybersecurity talent. As Beijing,
if they basically kept it LinkedIn long enough, I'm sure we'd send them plenty of people. I'm sure the U.S. government would love to help provide them with lots of cybersecurity talent.
They could just go on LinkedIn and find whoever they want. It's really
exactly. The U.S. government will provide them plenty. Which Five Eyes group would they like to recruit from? We will be more than happy to help them out.
Beijing has raised cybersecurity scrutiny this year, passing new laws and regulations and launching probes into tech companies like Didi. So now they're having a hard time finding. There's a cybersecurity talent shortage amid a push to secure data and develop the digital economy.
Maybe we help them out too much.
Okay, next up. Thank you for that one, CSQ. Jeff G sends in this one from CNN that the global supply chain nightmare is about to get better or worse. What do we think?
I've got work to do.
Better.
Come on, worse.
Where's Bessie?
I actually didn't hear the question. Sorry.
Just guess. You'll get it right.
You have a 50-50 shot.
The global supply chain is about to get better or worse.
Better.
Final word, Messi?
What is it, Messi? Is it going to get better or worse? Because I agree with whatever she says.
You're waiting with bated breath, Messi. What is your verdict?
I think she's probably having dinner or something. Not listening.
She can't be bothered with.
There she is. Wait.
No. I think everyone doesn't want me to answer. My network died in a second. Honestly,
that could be a sign.
Yeah.
So,
can I hear it for just the fun of it anyway?
The global supply chain is about to get better or worse, Messi, according to this CNN article I'm about to read.
Worse.
I would say worse, yeah.
As usual.
Worse.
There's your answer. The computer chip shortages, epic port congestion, and a serious lack of truck drivers, the world's delicate supply chains are under extreme stress and about to get worse. The supply chain nightmare is jacking up prices for consumers and slowing the global economic recovery. Unfortunately, Moody's analysts warn supply chain disruptors will get worse before they get better.
There was just real quick context. So Maersk has a near monopoly on the industry. Essentially, then they're propped up by German banks. They divested a bit with things, and then essentially there's China's, and there's like 2 or 3 companies that control all of global shipping. So it's a very centralized industry. The reason why this is relevant is their cybersecurity is absolute shit. So one of the things that happened a couple of years ago was essentially Maersk, one of the largest vendors in the world, they got caught some extra Russian spyware with things that basically ransomware their entire industry. Like every single one of their hundreds of ports worldwide was basically shut down, ransomware, the laptops won't work kind of thing, the servers are bricked, etc. The one thing that salvaged and saved them was the fact that there was like one of their ports in like Ghana or something had a server that was misconfigured and went offline a prior month and basically hadn't logged into their network yet. So they had to fly someone down there to get the hard drive and basically use it to restore to backups, buy a bunch of laptops and ship them out to essentially all their facilities worldwide. Global shipping for that industry, for that essentially that vendor, didn't happen for 2 or 3 weeks. Now, the reason why this is very relevant is when you're looking at these compounding effects, when you consider that their cybersecurity is absolute shit, And this is on top of every other disruption. You have a lot of nation-state actors all looking like steely-eyed at each other. The number of dominoes to just do a little tap in the right direction and send a lot of chain of events happening is not that much. And it doesn't have to be a state-based actor. It can be some non-state-based actors just wants to see it for the walls. We are in a very vulnerable position right now, and it doesn't take a whole lot to make it a lot worse.
Okay, next up is from Katerina. NeuroscienceNews.com. Unraveling the Mystery of Touch. Study provides new understanding of the neuroscience mechanisms that make some parts of the body so sensitive to touch. From Harvard. Some parts of the body, our hands and lips, for example, are more sensitive than others, making them essential tools in our ability to discern the most intricate details of the world around us. This ability is key to our survival, enabling us to safely navigate our surroundings and quickly understand and respond to new situations. It's perhaps unsurprising that the brain devotes considerable space to these sensitive skin surfaces that are specialized for fine, discriminative touch and continually gather detailed information via the sensory neurons they innervate them. I've never heard that word, innervate.
The Nobel Prize this year actually was handed out for similar research to this, for the touch proteins.
But how does the connection between the sensory neurons and the brain result in such an exquisitely sensitive skin? And that's an incredibly important question as we go into brain-computer interfaces. The new study led by researchers at Harvard Medical School has unveiled a mechanism that may underlie the greater sensitivity of certain skin regions. The research conducted in mice and published on October 11th in Cell shows that the over-representation of sensitive skin surfaces in the brain develops in early adolescence. Oh, really? That's wild. And can be pinpointed to the brainstem. Moreover, the sensory neurons that populate the more sensitive parts of the skin and relay information to the brainstem form more connections and stronger ones than neurons in less sensitive parts of the body. That makes sense. This study provides a mechanistic understanding of why more brain real estate is devoted to the surface of the skin with high touch acuity. Basically,
how old is this article?
Huh?
How old is this article? This has been known for ages. I'm just wondering from
2
a medical
days ago.
standpoint. Really?
Maybe they're doing like genetic sequence, like a variation of this.
Maybe.
Like they have to explain, like a lot of these like pop science articles have to explain this to laymen, and when they translate them, sometimes they basically translate the journal field context as the journalists understood it, rather than the new breakthrough parts that are the new parts for researchers in the field. They can sometimes confuse what the actual novel parts are.
It says scientists have long known that the certain body parts are overrepresented in the brain. The striking illustration includes, previously it was thought that the overrepresentation of sensitive skin regions in the brain could be attributed to a higher density of neurons innervating those skin areas. However, earlier work by somebody revealed that while sensitive skin does contain more neurons, the extra neurons are not sufficient to account for the additional brain space. We noticed that there was a rather meager number of neurons that were innervating the sensitive skin compared to what we expect, said the author who led the study. Here's the quote: "It just wasn't adding up. To investigate this contradiction, the researchers conducted a series of experiments in mice that involved imaging the brain and neurons as neurons were stimulated in different ways. First, they examined how different skin regions were represented in the brain throughout the development. This immediately told us that there's something more going on than just the density of intervention of nerve cells in the skin to account for this overrepresentation of the brain. It was really unexpected to see changes over the postnatal developmental time points. This might be just one of many changes over postnatal development that are important for allowing us to represent the tactile world, blah, blah, blah." Okay.
So it's the cause and effect they teased out.
Yeah. And the connection.
Retweet. I sent that one out. So the next one, DeepMind is developing. Yeah.
There's really quickly. There was a really interesting study that was done 9 years ago on the density of neurons and allergies. So related to this, like taking in too much stuff. Interestingly, there is a correlation between people with this density relating to allergies and intellect. Like you're likely to have these together, high high allergies related to these neurons, and high intellect. It's very interesting. I thought it was interesting.
So DeepMind is developing one algorithm to rule them all. Deep learning powers some of the most iconic AI apps, but deep learning models need retraining to be applied in new domains. DeepMind wants to enable neural networks to emulate algorithms to get the best of both worlds and is using Google Maps as the testbed. Classical algorithms are what have enabled software to eat the world, but the data that they work with does not always reflect the real world. Deep learning is what powers some of the most iconic AI apps today, but deep learning models need retraining to be applied to in domains that they were not originally designed for. So DeepMind is trying to combine deep learning and algorithms, creating the one algorithm to rule them all. A deep learning model that can learn how to emulate any algorithm, generating an algorithm equivalent model that can work with real-world data. So DeepMind has made headlines for some iconic feats in AI after developing AlphaGo and AlphaFold. And Charles Blundell and another researcher at DeepMind, they share a background in classical computing science and passion for applied innovations. The key thesis is that algorithms possess fundamentally different qualities when compared to deep learning methods. Like all well-grounded research, well,
very briefly, Microsoft
yeah.
has their Codex version of this kind of thing, where they basically take they scanned all the training models for the pseudocode and the comments, and the fact that they own GitHub now, and they use it to generate essentially a larger sequence. You've probably covered that here on Tech News. We got to use this on a recent project, and it was actually really interesting because it was shocking how well it worked. It still required some duct tape to tie it together from the pseudocode. But what's interesting is that the output was stochastic, and debugging a stochastic output where essentially it changes each time which code it generates is really interesting because it worked the majority of the time, but the code would change every time you ran it. The reason why this is interesting is when you're looking at the DeepMind variation, where they're basically saying, hey, we can basically come up with a general case model. At a fundamental information theory standpoint, when you go down to like the parse trees and stuff, way underneath essentially the compiler that it turns it into, that can be represented as a mathematical construct. Any algorithm can be broken down into essentially a series of very much simpler statements that in themselves essentially can be basically generalized across a larger domain. And the reason why that's extremely important is because that's how code can be ported between different systems. When you have JavaScript running, in a web browser at the same efficiency essentially as it's running locally versus essentially on a supercomputer somewhere, it's using those sorts of acceleration tricks. And that's the V8 engine and stuff that allowed Chrome to basically become a dominant thing. And the reason why it's relevant for this research is those particular breakthroughs they're talking about, where they're saying if we have DeepMind crafting these algorithms, they're going to be very strongly basically be leaning into those sorts of mathematical descriptions of those algorithms. And if they are successful in making that happen, it's not just essentially having AIs that can design algorithms. That is a general case a description of any information structure. And that is really, really interesting because a lot of compression tech relies on that. A lot of representations of higher order data sets basically no longer need even custom like user interfaces and such because you can work on naked data sets. Like that's a really powerful thing if they're able to unlock that.
Here we go. The birds have a mysterious quantum sense. Scientists have now seen it in action. This is how they see magnetic fields.
Birds aren't real, Tyler. You know that.
Seeing our world through the eyes of migratory birds would be rather spooky experience. Something about their visual system allows them to see our planet's magnetic field, a clever trick of quantum physics and biochemistry that helps them navigate vast distances. In early 2021, scientists from University of Tokyo announced they had, for the first time ever, directly observed a key reaction hypothesized to be behind birds and many other creatures' talents for sensing the direction of the Earth's poles. Importantly, this is evidence of quantum physics directly affecting a biochemical reaction in a cell, something we've long hypothesized but haven't seen in action before. Using a tailor-made microscope sensitive to faint flashes of light, the team watched a culture of human cells containing a special light-sensitive material respond dynamically to changes in the magnetic field. Oh, that's crazy. The change The researchers observed in the lab matched what would be expected if a quirky quantum effect was responsible for illuminating reaction. We've not modeled or added anything to the cells, says biophysicist Jonathan Woodward. We think we have extremely strong evidence that we've observed a purely quantum mechanical process affecting a chemical activity at the cellular level. That's wild. The next one, that's how birds migrate. The next one, even wilder. A strange radio waves emerge from the direction of the galactic center of the Milky Way. Astronomers have discovered unusual signals coming from the direction of the Milky Way's center. The radio waves fit no currently understood pattern, and they've been coming quite a while now, and scientists are very, very confused. And it has it has a very unique pattern as well. So Carl, speaking of crazy, this is the craziest episode of Tech News we've had in a while. Carl found this one, that the CIA has funded an app called Wicker. WICKR.
Is this for the birds?
1.6 million. The funding solidifies Wicker's position as an encrypted chat platform for government agencies.
To do what?
Then Evan found a crazy one. AI predicts accident hotspots simply by looking at satellite imagery and GPS data.
Whoa, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
Because essentially they can take general case GPS reports from the insurance databases and then cross compare that to the intersections, but the intersections will just be a general case GIS algorithm, which often, because some types of intersections just are inherently more dangerous, but they've never quite managed to tie that to the intersection design because normally they're working on a case by case basis. If you can just chain as a general, here's every intersection on the planet and here's all the accidents we have, it would be able to detect that pattern. That's brilliant. That's awesome.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
You could
By the way, Tyler.
Yes, 1 second. You could also, with these new real-time insurance pay as you drive systems.
Smart.
Right. You could reroute the routes. You would have different insurance rates based on the route. If you want to go the fastest way, which might take you through an intersection that statistically has a higher chance of accidents, you'll have to pay more, or you could pay less and just go around that intersection.
What's crazy is you could actually run a privacy preserving of that because the data set for that could be very, very small once you've generalized and you've given like an accident score for each intersection. You could actually generalize that and put it very much in a local model. And as long as the local data isn't tampered with, you could actually do a very privacy protected version of that. That basically say, here's the rate essentially of how dangerous they play. It's kind of interesting about that. It's less a reflection of the driver's skill or ability. It says it's just, look, you live in a dangerous neighborhood. That's just how it works. You can then take that data to the city planner and says, we all have basically more higher rates than we should. Why don't we reduce essentially the accident rates? Because essentially we're tired of paying this much for it. Look how much damage it's causing us. That could actually provide some very interesting civic organization parts. So that could be very non-dystopian and good. That'd be great.
That's actually what my startup is doing.
Seriously?
We're doing pay when car insurance, and we already use car accident data to predict on your path whether it's dangerous and suggest rerouting.
That's awesome.
Cool. Very cool. The next one from BB.
By the way, the Wicker. Sorry, Tyler.
Yes.
The Wicker.
Yep.
It's an interesting fact is that they were acquired by Amazon back in June. So they're an Amazon company now.
Huh.
The one that's supplying the government. Sorry.
I was just saying, interesting. Essentially, that wasn't how it was phrased as the headline. Right. CIA funds Amazon product thing. It's interesting.
It's AWS competition.
BB sends in this one from Bloomberg that Harvard University's Chinese language program will relocate to Taipei from Beijing, citing a hostile environment in China amid strained diplomatic relations between the world's two largest economies. And 3% of Americans quit their jobs in August. Here's where the mass exodus hit the hardest. Let's see.
Jeopardy?
It sounds like an opportunity to play Jeopardy if
Yeah.
I can get this article
It
to open.
does.
Here we go. Let's see. Here we go.
Restate the question.
Here we go.
Okay.
U.S. job openings post first drop of the year. We're gonna quits rate increases to record 2.9%. U.S. job openings declined in August for the first time this year. So 3% of Americans quit in August. And then we have to figure out how to turn this into a question. I need to know where they went.
Which sector?
Yeah, it doesn't really say.
Which one did they quit from?
F&B.
Well,
That
a
would be a
lot of it
Jeopardy
is
question.
teachers. I don't know if you guys saw that. There's an article that came out yesterday that there's massive teacher shortages, and it's focused primarily in Florida, but it's all over. People are taking early retirement, and then they're just quitting outright because of no mask
It's hazardous.
mandates.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're just they won't do it anymore. They're not interested in teaching at all. So, special ed and math are like the hardest hit.
It says businesses ranging from manufacturers to restaurants are desperate for workers, but workforce participation remains depressed amid ongoing virus fears, choppy school reopenings, and built-up savings accounts.
They'll just have to pay more.
A separate figure shows a record share of small business owners, 51%, said they had vacant positions they could not fill in September. A record 42% of small firms said they raised compensation, and nearly a third indicated they plan to do so in the next 3 months. Okay, there was no real way to play tech news on that one, sorry.
Tyler, there was one. I took a deep dive into that Wicker thing. It's interesting that most of our stories can actually come back to this one nonprofit that invests on behalf of the government intelligence service. It's called IQT. IQT Tel.
InQtel.
Yeah, InQtel. So basically, I'll send you the link. But what you do is they actually invested 1.6 million in Wicker after they passed their whatever their protocol, whatever their privacy protocols, whatever security protocols. And if you look at their Wikipedia of InQtel,
they've been around for a long time.
Yeah, and it's also they look at the software investment, the material science investment in biotech, to even battery infrastructure. So this is
that's just the public list.
Yes, exactly. And so basically, they even invest in DVR archiving, phone service. Like they actually do phone. I'll send it to you right now. Arabic character recognition, handwriting recognition, 3D facial recognition. Even in biotech, they're in biotech, and also battery technology as well. They're investing. So they're actually strategically investing on behalf of the American public, I guess. Interesting deep dive there.
Okay, next up. A buy now, pay later for Mexico. Nilo joins the buy now, pay later rush with $20 million in new funding for the Mexican market. And it's healthy to escape the noise of the world sometimes. Soon you'll be able to escape the noise from a company called Palm. Is that the old Palm company that I'm thinking of? No. Could it be?
I miss those guys.
Palm Pilots.
Yeah. It's
those were awesome.
The Twitter account is called Palm, and it's verified, and yeah, I think it is the old Palm company.
No. Well, their brand got bankrupt and resold like 6 times because Kodak, never died. It just basically got recycled 20 times, and now it's like some Chinese
but the URL is palm.com, and when you go there, the landing page says we've been busy, and they're going to announce something big on the 26th, which is all about.
Tyler, do you remember the Palm phone? Essentially, they relaunched with the tiny little, the extra tiny phone that they launched and say, "Look, we've put in the smallest package ever." It's like this little tiny, 1-inch type kind of thing.
I'm retweeting it right now. It says Palm is about to launch its first new product in 3 years, and it's the tiniest phone you've ever seen. It looks like the world's smallest iPhone.
They didn't update. The journalists loved it, by the way, which was hilarious. They're like, "This thing is ridiculous. There's no practical reason to have one, but I love it. I want to have one just so I can just show off at bars or something."
By the way, now I'm looking at photos of it in the past 20 hours, and it's a cute little Android phone, but the interface, I have to say, is super, super cute. You've got your most necessary apps right on the front of the phone. You've got Gmail, Twitter, YouTube, whatever your most important apps are, Spotify, photos. And it's just a super cute, small phone. Looks like an ideal kid's phone, but it's stylish and all black and everything. I just tweeting out some photos so you can see it.
It's the size of a credit card, they say.
Yes.
3.8 inches by 2 inches.
Yes.
Now picture when these things are available in 6 years for $30 or $10, and you just get them by the dozens or the hundreds, and you just hand them out like candy. And then we have these things littered all throughout the environment. That's going to get really interesting. We start looking for sensors and what you do for long-term right to repair type kinds of things. You're going to start seeing these sorts of digital devices popping up all over the places in weird places you wouldn't expect to see them before. And I think these are kind of a nice little harbinger of what's to come with the form factors they might take.
I'm kind of digging this little palm. Anyway, the next one, William Shatner becomes the oldest person to go to space, as he just went up on Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket. And then BBC is reporting that Mars scientists, yes, there's scientists on Mars apparently, now know where to look for life. Images from NASA's Perseverance rover shows it's in a great place to find traces of ancient microbes on Mars.
We're seeing that same headline every year for the last 10 years. Maybe this time will be a thing.
Just go to the shopping mall on Mars, and I'm sure you could find the leftovers of whatever they were doing there. They got shopping malls, right?
There's actually a scientist that's here on Clubhouse a lot. He's the far chief scientist Jim Green with things, and for people that around the Small Social Giant Leaps Club, he comes around quite a bit. One of his specialties was actually for a sort of magnetic shielding that basically could be used to basically restore Martian atmosphere, which is really, really cool. But there's some fun folk around here that actually work on the Mars programs and the Mars rovers and such, and they are very fun to talk to. And they're still here on Clubhouse, even with the low engagements and everything. I love this place.
We got a little sidetracked on this global supply chain meltdown. The CNN article says, as the global economic recovery continues to gather steam, what is increasingly apparent is how it will be stymied by the supply chain disruptions that are now showing up around every corner. It says border controls and mobility restrictions, unavailability of global vaccine passes, and pent-up demand for being stuck at home have combined for a perfect storm where global production will be hampered because deliveries are not made in time, costs and prices will rise, and GDP growth worldwide will not be as robust as a result. The weakest link may be the shortage of truck drivers, it says, an issue that has contributed to congestion at ports and caused gas stations in the UK to run dry. And there are dark clouds ahead because several factors make overcoming the supply constraints particularly challenging. First,
the truck driver is not the issue with things. That they're wrong. It's 90% of global trade goes over the boats. The thing is that the people that own the boats also own the harbor infrastructure for essentially maritime industries. And the thing is that the truck drivers essentially are the ones that get the lowest on the totem pole as far as the supply chain is concerned on who gets to basically represent the which parts. So they're trying to shift blame to them. But the fact is that the maritime ports themselves have a limited ability to basically scale on being able to rapidly increase the amount of capacity they are basically working with. So the truck drivers are waiting in for hours outside of these things, just waiting for their loads. That's a bit of PR misdirection right there. If you go to marinetraffic.com, you can actually see the ships stuck outside of a lot of major ports, including Port of Los Angeles. You can see that Singapore. They're everywhere right now. They're just not moving. That has nothing to do with the trucks. That just has to do with the part of the ports where it interfaces with the ships themselves. That's where the bottleneck is.
Okay, next up, Ohio University launches virtual reality and game development as a major. Starting this fall, Ohio University is offering a new undergraduate major in virtual reality and game development. Boom. There it is. Done. Evan found this one, that an urgent warning about...
Tyler,
Yes?
I don't understand why that's a big deal because other universities have had game development as a major. I mean, Santa Cruz has that. So is that actually news?
We don't...
And what I would also
The
say to
world will
that,
never know.
what I would also say to that particular headline, because I was an administrator of a university in Ohio, is that I imagine that it's strategy to recruit more students. I mean, not necessarily from an academic standpoint, but in the same way that we see a lot of what do they call it when people play video games at university, esports, right? So I know for a fact that universities that are struggling with enrollment, particularly in that part of the country, are trying to develop innovative ways to recruit students. So I mean, it could very well be about the tech, but my hunch is that it's more so about how do we get more kids in the door.
Another thing to consider is the price point, because essentially it used to be for a VR headset and the equipment and the computer to run it used to be $3,000. So if you want to basically have a program for 100 students, 125 or so, you're easily looking at $500,000 plus the professors and tenure or whatever to run that program. So you're looking at $500,000 to $1 million to launch a program. On the other hand, because the Oculus headsets have dropped so low in price, you can get essentially intro to VR stuff that's essentially for $300. And the skills of the number of people that basically have that skill set that are available to train people on that for Unity or Unreal Engine has dropped very, very low. So you could launch a program for that for under $100,000 or $200,000. That sort of magic cutoff point means that a lot of universities that didn't have the financial resources to launch programs like this are now able to get into the game. And you're going to see more of those as the market prices keep dropping.
Okay. Next up is from Evan. Urgent warning about Apple AirPods and other earphones that trigger health issues like vertigo and hearing loss. Owners of in-ear headphones like Apple AirPods have been warned using them could cause serious health issues like vertigo and even hearing loss. Repeated and long-lasting use of gadgets could lead to warning signs that are often overlooked as leading indicators of health hazards to come. All headphones, experts warn, but with a specific nod to in-ear buds, could be causing an unseen buildup of earwax at the surface level. It impacts the earwax system. If we put an earbud in, like we see in the earbud in-ear earphones, they end up compressing that area. They end up blocking natural escape routes, compress it, and maintain a warm environment, which inhibits the wax from drying out and causes all kinds of issues. Apple has denied a request for comment, but earwax buildup could be the least of anyone's problems when hearing loss and vertigo are concerned. The buildup leads to hearing problems, which is often accompanied by pain, dizziness, and vertigo. Other experts warn that human bodies haven't adapted to this new technology. Yeah, that will
So
take...
much for the health device.
That's going to take a while for our bodies to go through the evolutionary process of adapting to earpods. Yeah, it hasn't happened yet.
Implants.
They've only been around for a couple of years.
Essentially the CRISPR babies of the future, no AirPods compatible.
Give it
it's going to be like appendix first and then earwax alternate
give
escape
it
route.
50,000 years. We might evolve to adapt.
But you won't
editing.
necessarily like where it ends up. I mean, like bodies are not designed for aesthetics necessarily.
Not yet.
And here's a great quote. They design products that we get addicted to on purpose so that they can maximize their profits. Holy fuck.
No.
Sticks. I swear to God, that's a quote in the article.
Where's the X-Files music?
I think they're putting profits above humans again. Where's the Wall Street Journal? Hey, Wall Street Journal.
Ever eaten Doritos? That's basically that same
breaking news. Another big tech company putting profits above their users. This just in. They design products that we get addicted to on purpose so that they can maximize their profits.
And they were cheering it for 12 years before they said anything about it. Wall Street Journal and Washington Post and all these other groups. Go to the archives.
It's the new cigarettes. You made your earpods addictive. I'm addicted. And now I've got vertigo. I'm suing. Who can I sue?
By the way, Apple, if you look at their percentage of revenues from AirPods, it is absolutely astounding what removing the headphone jack did to their quarterly revenue. that those are actually significant fractions of their revenue base right now, which it's crazy how fast that thing took over.
Hold on. It says the Sun has reached out to Apple for a comment. They got a comment from
the
the
Sun.
Yes.
I wonder if Apple has their own version of Amazon's which journalists said nice things about us, but Apple just has the ignore list, for the equivalent.
AI finds a blind spot in climate change studies. Scientists looked at more than 100,000 studies and found that the world has a giant problem. New machine learning-based study would suggest a vast majority of the world, 85% of the world population is experiencing the effects of climate change. Climate change studies are twice as likely to focus on wealthier countries in Europe and North America than low-income countries like those in Africa and the Pacific Islands, according to CNN. The next one, Mark Zuckerberg
Poorly
gave
functioning data. Sorry, go on.
Mark Zuckerberg gave $419.5 million to nonprofits to help turn out likely Democratic voters in the 2020 election. According to the Daily Mail, Mark Zuckerberg gave nearly $500 million to 2020 election nonprofits.
Sounds like he's playing both sides of the aisle here. He's being a good billionaire.
Hold on here. Hold on. Zuckerberg's contributions nearly matched the federal and state funds for COVID-19 related election expenses. Grants boosted Biden's dollar per vote value, and Biden's counties were 3.5 times more likely to receive funding from the group. On average, Biden counties received $2.85 per vote. Okay.
That's a strange metric, by the way.
Yeah.
Dollars per vote per county.
Yeah. Meditation affects brain networks differently in long-term meditators. Researchers discovered differences in the brain's emotional networks between those who do not meditate, novice meditators, and those who have practiced for years. So meditation affects your brain.
Right. Random side note. Anyone that basically has any headline on meditation, look at the funding sources. There is always a Buddhist consciousness network that funds one of these things. It's really amazing how much research they fund in this space.
You meditate, Tyler?
I kind of naturally just zone out. I have this. I have an amazing ability to just chill the fuck out on demand.
Stone. It's got stoning, right?
No, without any pharmaceutical help.
Wow, I wish I could do that. Yeah, that's super nice. But I want to know that the research you just read. So I'm assuming it's for good that the meditation is different in a good way.
Yep. Toronto doctors. Heyman, you sent in this one. Toronto doctors just made a medical history with the help from a flying drone just shy of 38 years since the world's first successful lung transplant in Toronto. The same hospital flew a lung for transplant via drone.
Cool.
It's a bird. It's a plane. It's a lung. It's a lung in a drone.
It's a lung in a box.
What happens when that gets mixed up with the Amazon deliveries and you end up with a lung on your front stick?
And that burrito is not going to be something that gets fixed.
And also, we'll be having the person behind it on Canadian Tech News or Med Tech News, depending on their schedule, next week, hopefully. I'm just trying to arrange that. The person, the healthcare, as well as the tech person behind it. And Messi, I'm hoping also to get people from the African side as well, Zipline, etc.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And
so
Chris,
talk about medicine and drones.
Chris Fornov, weren't you working on a drone project with Warren?
I've advised on a number of them with things. It's a perennial hobby.
Come, Chris. I'll DM you.
Yeah, and then my president, she's a lung advocate, and my link to her is one of my close friends had a double lung transplant. So when all this stuff went down, I was like, we need people in the lung space. Do you know anybody? So no, this is all connected. Thank you.
Sorry, what is a lung advocate?
In the medical
There's a
space,
lot
they have
of
advocates for
pulmonary
everything.
diseases. Yeah, there's a lot of pulmonary diseases that just don't get the advocacy. For those that don't know, respiratory therapy is like the redheaded stepchild of medicine. No one gives it any money or any.
Pre-COVID.
Even post COVID, like they'll spend the money on the ventilators, but after they buy the ventilators, they don't care. It's like I got it. I checked the box.
Okay, are we ready?
Medical marketing companies in USA have a big part about advocacy networks and stuff. That's a big part of how establishing long-term. It's a whole thing there.
Okay, here we
So
go.
Heyman, I was just
Yeah.
gonna ask you very quickly: is that like the extension of the zip line from
No, it's a different
Rwanda?
company. No, it's a
Okay,
different
okay.
company. They've been working separately, but it's just I just thought that because medicine and drones is coming a big issue. Well, not big issue. It's a common thing now. Oh, by the way, Abu Dhabi announced that they by 2022 they'll have a medical drone service. And yesterday, northern Canada has started testing out drone deliveries for medications and medical products. So that's also
Matternet
coming.
has
So
something simpler in Europe with things. One of the things that's wonderful about these, from a regulatory standpoint, is it's point to point between known
yeah.
locations, which makes it way simpler in the permitting inside. It also essentially can be scheduled in advance, and you also have the known cargo essentially is following essentially as so you don't have to worry about what about 1,000 different customers shipping different things. It's like we're going to shipping one thing for between these locations at these times, and it's a thing. So that makes it really easy to go down the checklist of essentially the permitting side. And the networks this establishes are already basically building off earlier work for the helipad evacuations, for basically moving patients between hospitals and helicopters. So many of them are actually using a lot of those same networks and advocacy groups essentially to basically get these things passed. And it's also great from a public sentiment standpoint because it means, well, can we trust drones flying through the skies? It's like you do it every day for your heart transplants and your heart and now your lungs apparently. So the more the medical establishment uses that, the more they validate drones as a delivery thing. It's just a general thing that people can trust in general.
I'll keep you all posted on that. We're looking forward to it.
Blood transfusions in developing countries is like I think longer term, essentially a little more interesting from a like immediate impact from drone stuff, and that's something that Zipline's focused really heavily on. I'm a huge supporter of the work they're doing there.
And also, UNICEF announced that they actually are supporting drones for vaccines going forward because of the fact that with the pandemic and also vaccine delivery. That's what was the whole point of Zipline as well, right? But UNICEF actually made it a little bit more formal recently.
I'm curious if Gabby's involved. That'd be cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next up, let's do this. We've got this one from Katerina from Bloomberg. As countries rush to buy Merck's new COVID pill, worries mount that poor countries may be left behind. Worries by who?
That's almost a joke.
Yeah, we need
Isn't
the
it?
breaking news soundtrack for that.
This just in. Could this not apply to every new product that comes out? The new Lamborghini just came out. Worries that the poor countries won't get the new Lamborghini.
It's anti-poor.
New Apple VR headset just came out. Worries that poor countries won't get the new Apple Metaverse headset. Name a product that this doesn't apply to.
I know.
This is a life or death thing. It's supposedly supposed to be under different rules, but yeah.
I know what they can give away NFT for free.
It says moves by several countries to buy supplies of Merck's promising new COVID pill before it's even approved are raising concerns that some poorer nations could be left behind. Yes, that's how the economy works. In a repeat of the slow and inequitable rollout of vaccines. Yes, precisely. The countries that develop the shit get it first. That's how it works. By the way, hang on. Cuba developed their own COVID vaccine. Cuba. If you've not been to Cuba is a post-apocalyptic scenario. If you want to know what the world looks like after nuclear holocaust, go visit Havana and you'll get a little taste of what a post-apocalyptic nuclear fallout looks like. I love it. I love Cuba. I think Havana's amazing. The people are incredible, and they can still make their own vaccines. And my point, hang on. The point is, the places that make the vaccines get them first. And the Merck and its and the countries who are its allies are also going to get it first. Yes, poor countries. Hello from Thailand, where we didn't get the vaccine until all of America and Europe already got it.
Right.
And we're still waiting. I mean,
right.
there are still millions of people that are still waiting.
And Messi was the first to say when I read this headline, Messi's in Ethiopia, and when I read this ridiculous headline that people are worried about poor countries being, last in line. You don't think Ethiopia's known this for like 500 years? You think this is news to people in the developing world? That I can assure you, the poor countries, this is not news to us, and we're not worried about this. There's nothing to worry about. We know exactly how this is going to go down.
No question. I mean, if people are really, 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 whoever wrote that crazy thing is, he should just look at what Ramaphosa from South Africa said, even at the UN just a week and a half ago, how the vaccine is just so crazy. 3.5 Africans are like one vaccination, 1.8, just close to 2 are double, like they got both vaccinations. And most countries are like in that scenario, even knowing that some US vaccinations are being thrown out. I mean, thrown out, they are getting even expired because they are hoarding it. So I mean, I'm just blown away. Whoever wrote that, just
policy-wise, reserve populations increase mutation rate. So essentially, any group worldwide that has a significant number of unvaccinated population basically creates essentially the next delta, theta, whatever variation ends up coming out. So essentially, strategy-wise, saying should fully developed countries be handing out booster shots versus essentially doing some first dosages to developing countries. This is going to have a very real ramification for long-term development, not just with this COVID disease, but essentially for future ones for pandemics and such.
And you're not getting much of a significant change with the booster, right? I mean, sure, for people with high risk, yes. But if you look at those graphs, they're not that significant. And also to defend Cuba, as a Canadian, I guess. But the thing is, they have 5 vaccines in trial, their own homegrown endemic vaccines. And they went out to Italy and Europe and all these other countries.
Hang on, wait a minute. Wait. Are you saying that Cuba made a vaccine and they gave it to themselves first?
Oh, geez. Oh, my God. Really?
They have
they kept it to
themselves.
Diplomacy
is a whole thing.
Is that, wait, what's going on here? Because
yeah, CIGB 66, they kept it to themselves because they couldn't get it out because apparently ships were not being allowed by some big country above them. I don't know what happened there.
Canada.
This is directly from the Bloomberg article. Countries that have struggled to vaccinate their populations could end up in the back of the line for brand new therapies like this new Merck pill. A global initiative to deploy treatments is at risk of running into the same problems the COVAX vaccine distribution effort has faced, according to an independent report commissioned by the World Health Organization. Well, there's your tax dollars going to work with the WHO, who had a crack team of Sherlock Holmeses figuring out through this independent report that they commissioned that the countries with smaller economies are going to be last in line to get these treatments. Some real top-notch economists were employed to figure that one out.
Some major horsepower.
But and also, is there some protectionism going on?
Yeah.
Sorry, is there some protectionism going on?
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
I think so. That's what they have been doing from the very beginning. But I think
Pfizer and Moderna, they're always protected, right? I mean, they're not no competition's coming to the market in the U.S., even though these other vaccines have shown similar efficacy. They're not similar, but it's close to it. It's good enough for a pandemic treatment.
But the COVAX is actually also a lot of the pharmaceuticals got involved in because Bill Gates mobilized them very early on the COVID when it came out. And he knew that this was going to happen. So that's what he did, the pharmaceuticals to get involved. So all those COVAX is actually from Pfizer and others, Johnson, JJ and others. So it's not really new players. It's just that they were structured in a different way. The only other one good news that's happening in Africa is also South Africa, big pharmaceutical. They just got like 600 million injection to develop African own vaccination. So everybody is doing their own vaccinations. So yeah, that's the good one that's coming up now.
It's just interesting that kudos to the developing world who, during the vaccine global rollout, got left last in line as usual, as they knew they would. And God bless the fact that I didn't see a single headline of the developing world where in Thailand we were relatively towards the end of the line, not the very far end of the line, but boy, it was interesting to watch the vaccine rollouts. That where all my American friends were all getting vaccinated. There was no signs of it getting anywhere near Thailand, and all my American friends were getting vaccinated. And then all my European friends got vaccinated, and there was still no signs of any vaccines on the horizon getting into Southeast Asia. And then months later, it finally starts arriving very slowly.
People are still waiting, though, Tyler, right? I
Waiting,
mean,
yes,
let's
still
make
waiting.
that clear.
We are still fucking waiting, and you're getting your triple fucking booster, and we're still waiting. So the headlines that say, "Oh, the poor countries might be a little could be the rush to buy the Merck's COVID pills risks leaving poor countries behind." Yeah, that ain't fucking news to us. That ain't news to that.
But it wasn't able to unload at port with things because the ships don't do that anymore.
And if you look around the world and see, if there's a website called COVID-19 Vaccine Tracker, just look at all the countries, and you'll see there's a lot of vaccine diplomacy going on.
Let me just point
And that
out.
was
Let me just point out, as an American living in Southeast Asia, that I never once heard anyone here in the region, and I have friends in Vietnam and elsewhere. I never once heard anyone complain in the way that I'm complaining right now about what I'm pointing out. I never once heard any Thais. I never saw a single Thai headline about, hey, can we get some of these vaccines, please? In fact, I saw exactly the opposite. When the vaccines were being donated from some countries to Thailand or to Vietnam, what I did see was a whole lot of grateful thank you very much for thinking about us in our time of need. So kudos to the developing countries who could have made a huge stink, honestly. If God knows, if they were full of Americans, we would have never heard the end of it.
What if Thailand was full of Ashley Giovics?
Imagine if the developing world made the vaccines and America was waiting. Dear God, would we ever hear the end of that?
You made me wait 5 minutes. This thing made me itch. You fuckers, I'm going to sue you out of existence. God damn this country.
Unbelievable.
There's a gentleman essentially. Sorry, go on, Miss MZ. Sorry, Missy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
No, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say that. Don't you remember? I was in the U.S. when the very first shot came, and it was in UK. My goodness, the whole U.S. was going up in arms, even though they were gonna be just so resistant to take it. When it came later on, they're like, "Oh my God, U.S. wasn't the first. How could that happen?"
Messi, let me interject here. Thailand had protests about vaccines because the prime minister couldn't get them. People were doing big protests, COVID protests, like you guys were having in the West, except our protests were, where are the vaccines, you dipshit? Get us vaccines.
We've had state-based disinformation campaigns at a scale that
we did not. However,
because remember, Tyler, we were having just flu.
However, those protests were not in any way expressing any kind of anger to the West. And there was never once any expressions of like, this is unfair that you're getting them first and we're not. No, it was, hey, Prime Minister, snap, snap, chop, chop. We need vaccines. Let's do this. What's the problem? What's the holdup? That was the protests. Meanwhile, you've got people in the West being like, you can't force us to take these vaccines. And the rest of
it's made in a third world country, Tyler.
The developing world is like, what the fuck is going on?
There is. I've hosted some small rooms with some vaccine developers who basically like biochemists essentially that develop essentially vaccines. One of the really cool things that one of the ones working on was specifically a sort of toolkit that allows essentially creating vaccine development research labs. It's specifically in resource-constrained environments, and they were open sourcing a lot of the underlying tool sets, capabilities, and information infrastructures, and creating like almost a curricula. What's really exciting about some of the newest technologies coming out and the way that these things are being developed is that the bootstrapping capability of going from we don't have a medical infrastructure or people that have the expertise to do something like this to going we can create our own vaccines for arbitrary pathogens. That sort of capability is something that could spread very quickly in the near future. The underlying technical infrastructure is almost there. It's kind of there essentially. It's almost there essentially in the nice package with a bow on top. In the very near term, the economics are going to be lining up. They're very close to that right now. The education component's are one thing, but the real part is going to be regulatory and geopolitics. What's going to be cool about this is that the potential is for the future when you're saying the country that basically develops it gets the vaccine first. There's a scenario where this might be the last pandemic where essentially you have vaccine diplomacy, because in the future it's going to be considered to be required nation state like level security. You've got your own military, sure. You've got essentially your border control, sure. But do you have your local vaccine development group? And that's just something that just every nation just has as like a baseline thing of operations. That's something I think we're going to see in the near future because we're already seeing the emerging stages of it.
And can anyone guess how many vaccines have been approved and how many total vaccine candidates are there in the world right now?
1,000 in process. I'd say 50 that have been approved and only like 10 that got to market.
You're pretty high number there. No, 22 vaccines have been approved. 151 vaccine candidates are in place. 50 are in phase 3 trials right now.
How many antivirals are in the mix right now too?
Antivirals are
virus replication.
Yeah. So there's there's VL. I'll get back to you on this one.
I was including early lab stuff that didn't make it to the later stages.
There's one I see so far for viral.
But at least two, because there's a Japanese one too besides Merck.
Yeah, Medicago is one, plant-based. I'm not sure what that is. It's only in phase. It's in phase 3 trial right now.
Okay. Can I do a few more here? So here's a really interesting one. Keeping on the COVID tip for a second. Apparently, there was a news video, like a TV news station, was doing a story about COVID. So they went to, they wanted to show an ICU unit. This is in Edmonton, Canada, CBC, which is like their main television news channel, one of their biggest channels, CBC.
Yeah, one government sponsored a bit.
Yeah, like the BBC of Canada.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's like your PBS.
Yeah, which by the way, it's very renowned. It's very reputable, and so they did a news report about COVID, and they filmed a training facility where it shows a hospital bed. It looks like it's an ICU unit, an intensive care unit facility, but they didn't go to an actual ICU unit because those people have COVID in there, and then you've got to there's a lot of paperwork that you got to sign that say you're not going to hold the hospital responsible if you get COVID for going into the fucking ICU where people are dying of COVID, right? So the hospital says, we got a better idea. Why don't we send you to our training facility? And no one's been over there for a while. And it's an identical clone of the ICU rooms, but it's the training room. And in the training room, there's a mannequin in the bed who's wearing the mask and everything. And the doctors learn to work on the mannequin in the training room. So you see where we're going here?
Oh no.
The newsroom went into the training room with the mannequin as their shot where they're talking about, COVID deaths and hospitals are full and blah, blah, blah. And some clever folks saw this segment and zoomed in and said, hold on a second. This is a whole bunch of funny business. That's not a person. That's a mannequin. There ain't people in the ice. There's nobody dying in these hospitals. That's a fucking mannequin. What is big corporate media trying to fool us? They think we're stupid? That mannequin doesn't have COVID. And this is the conspiracy theory, is that the hospitals aren't full, that they're manufacturing news, as evidenced by the fact that they need to use mannequins in their shots.
I mean, they're welcome to use the freezer trucks out back with things they had to use earlier. Those were some of the darker calls earlier on with things. By the way, they charge money for those. They're expensive to charter.
That's what
would not recommend.
You know what? That's what should have happened. Why didn't that happen? I mean,
there's some very good reasons for that, but they weren't good.
But the freezer trucks, and for those who don't know what Chris is saying, like the cadavers, the dead bodies, once they expire in the ICU rooms, there's so many of them that they had to hire freezer trucks to keep them in before they could process them and take them to the morgue. So why didn't the news crews show shots of inside of those freezers to really drive home what's really going on? Because there's a whole bunch of people who believe that this whole thing was manufactured. Yeah.
HIPAA policies.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, they've got coverings on their heads with stuff. The body bags are fully covered with things, but you can clearly see there's people inside. And it's just, yeah, it's a darker thing. But honestly, the problem is that we're using logic, and these are not things that are decided on logic. They're decided on emotion.
I agree. Yeah, I agree 1,000%. So the next article, CNBC, luxury watch shortage drives growth of $20 billion secondhand market for luxury watches, just like cars. There's a huge shortage.
Hold on, Tyler, you're using the wrong headline. This is the semiconductor-free technology, which is going to be the sexiest thing ever. It's when you basically don't use computer chips. I mean, you're going to see Gartner and Accenture and all these other groups talking about semiconductor-free infrastructure. Your manufacturing supply chain is secure. The future is without technology, and they're going to rebrand the whole thing.
Okay, the next one from Fortune.com. Welcome to the TikTok economy. The TikTok algorithm's proficiency makes Facebook and Instagram seem like social media 1.0 in comparison. Ooh, burn, Fortune. Oh, boy. You sure know how to throw a zinger at Facebook, eh? It says, let's warm up with a bit of word association. I say Facebook, you say boomer. I say Twitter, you say doom scroll. I say Instagram, you say poser. I say TikTok, you say something. So Fortune is...
China.
Now hold that thought for a moment. It's trickier to find consensus on this one. To me, TikTok is merely a weirdly transfixing water balloon videos, monarch butterfly activists, air-fried ice cream sandwich recipes, and Bo Burnham mashups.
And a threat to national security.
Yes. But your TikTok is surely something radically different because that's how the algorithm wants it. The algorithm, with air quotes, you hear those two words a lot when TikTok is the topic of conversation. It's the mysterious all-seeing recommendation engine that powers the platform. It instantly digests every pause, click, swipe, and share to serve up an ultimate brain candy buffet, unlimited helping of 15 to 30 seconds, or sometimes but rarely 3-minute videos that have a way of gluing users to their phones for hours at a time.
It's 4 lines of code. I'm serious. Like they analyzed it. Even though it intakes like 80 different variables, there's only 1 or 2 that actually matter. It's 4 lines of code could approximate 90% of the algorithm. Which is, whenever someone says the algorithm, that's a nice fancy way of saying my dog's secondhand cousin, whatever. Essentially, pet parakeet did something with it. It's a marketing thing at this point. No one actually cares about the actual technology involved, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, but there's also broad use of TikTok beyond, like, people think right now, a lot of people think it's just for social dancing and whatever recipes and stuff. But I've actually used it for research, and I've talked to other people who have too, just if I need some quick bites on something, on law. So it's also driving how people are being forced to do their presentations and communicate with customers now. Everybody wants these short video presentations. So it's interesting.
So this is a deep dive on with a lot of data about TikTok and all of their partnerships and all the money and how people are making money in the TikTok economy. So if you want to know
it's an introduction for essentially what your kids are doing.
So the next one is from Netta. Instagram censors an evolutionary biologist for posting a chart from a study by a prominent science journal that showed biological men are stronger than biological women in a range of Olympic sports.
Oh dear, this is going to be a very well-reasoned, nothing could possibly go wrong with this in the larger Twitter sphere.
An evolutionary biologist was censored by Instagram for hate speech.
This was the same thing that got Google into their original mess that got the labor market all up in a tizzy with that for the organization thing over there.
This is from the Daily Mail in the UK. It says, evolutionary biologist Colin Wright had one of his Instagram posts removed for hate speech and claims he was unable to appeal his review. The chart taken from a science study showed that males have a performance advantage over females across a range of sports.
Which does not
Wait,
include
seriously?
shooting ranges, which basically gets because the military commander people will say this at every time for the flowchart conversation. They'll say women are basically have better eyesight and are able to basically hit targets better at a range. So whatever thing about strength and whatever arguments are made from that is irrelevant because essentially there's a range of skills and abilities in a larger complex society. But we go down the same flowchart conversations whenever these things come up because state-based actors are paying us to get all upset with each other because it drives engagement for the groups that are willing to take the payoffs.
Wait a minute, but Chris, people are in different ranges of things. People have different, I mean, if I'm going to go straight against somebody in a straight physical sport like cycling, the guy has a huge benefit over me.
Because we made bikes that way, because we made the rules of the race that way, because essentially everything was originally for the Olympics when they revised it 100 years ago was made to emphasize certain qualities or certain economic
Right. And so, but this is saying that those qualities exist. It's not saying men are better. It's saying these qualities exist in these scenarios, right? This is what it's saying. In this scenario, period, pin it, this men do better, right? And you're pointing out, yes, because of X. Well, that's fine.
My point is more about the flowchart conversations, about essentially how when these keep emerging, there's never new information. It's always a rehash of the same conversations, and it always has the same effects on the groups involved that discuss it with stuff. And so I get really irritated when I hear these headlines because they always evolve the exact same way.
Well, I mean, I think that the implication here that's that the reason these things tend to happen or tend to come up more is because of the issue of trans athletes. So this is actually
big time.
they're happening.
Big time.
Yeah,
big time.
It's actually happening now in high school and college athletics as well. So I think this is something that is it isn't actually an issue. Is there an advantage?
No,
and there is. This is
I'll
what they're
give
saying. There's a biological advantage.
No, there is. And I coach in a high school mountain bike league, and we have transgender youth. And how do we do that? Because there are physical benefits. So how do we address that? So we're just following the Olympic level and their guidance at this point. But it does come up, and it is meaningful in that scenario.
Okay, next up. 5 minutes left and 4 headlines. Here we go. Russia's population undergoes the largest ever peacetime decline. From The Guardian, analysts finds natural population fell by 1 million people between October 2020 and September 2021, with COVID cited as a principal cause. Oh, that's dark. Oh shit, I wasn't expecting that.
In the United States, they send the Christian camps. You go to essentially Christian youth camps where you learn how to have abstinence, essentially not have teen pregnancy sex or whatever. It's the whole thing because God wants you to be that way. In Russia, they have the opposite version. You go to teen sex camps, they say have more children from Mother Russia. And yeah, it's pretty crazy seeing the cultural shifts on what the far right looks like on either thing. They have, whenever there's a war, they're the meat grinder. That basically, and essentially afterwards, there's this huge, basically, population. It's for a lot of groups that basically were trying to slow population growth for many, many years. Like you're seeing a version of this in China where they're going, wait, we want to go the opposite direction now. All the policies shift overnight, but the thing is that there's only so much you can do to induce that from a state-based level. You can have very large effects for long periods of time, but the short-term effects take it's a lot of effort to basically reverse essentially those fertility trends.
So Bloomberg has a report that Chinese workers reveal their working hours online as a backlash to the 996 office culture. Employees shared data on working hours in an online campaign. Effort recalls 2019 campaign against tech startups in China. A group of private sector employees in China have begun an online campaign to gather their working hours in a protest against the excessive work culture in the country. The so-called Worker Lives Matter campaign. Oh boy, China.
They have political cover for this now because the state's looking for excuses to crack down their tech sector. So this gives them more political cover.
Well, they got to be. I imagine they've just anchored the whole Black Lives Matter folks by calling their initiative the Worker Lives Matter campaign. The so-called Worker Lives Matter campaign is asking employees in various industries like technology and finance to share what time they start and end their workday, as well as how many days they work per week. As of Thursday, the spreadsheet had grown to 4,000 entries, including contributions from within tech giants like Tencent, Alibaba, and ByteDance, the country's grueling work pace known as 996. From working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, was long celebrated by tech billionaires like Jack Ma, etc. We workers also need to live, declared the campaign's page on the software collaboration site GitHub.
Do they? Just say.
The latest campaign echoes earlier effort by tech employees to protest long working hours. In response to growing public pressure, internet companies, including ByteDance, have taken initial steps to dial down working hours. Earlier this year, the two short video giants canceled an alternating system where employees take just 1 day off per week every 2 weeks. And now they've came up with a very clever crowdsourced campaign to show how hard they're working.
I think it's more impressive they had the campaign using all that tech skills they learned how to do with basically organizing groups of people online. You know, that's one of those skills you pick up when you work in tech.
The humans are revolting. And then in last but not least, with 1 minute left on the dot, we've got this one from our friend Aaron. He sends this one in that Amsterdam-based e-bike startup VanMoof unveils its first special e-bike. They're calling it a hyperbike. It looks like a normal bike, looks like a plain old normal bicycle, but this ain't no normal bicycle. It goes 50 kilometers per hour.
I want that in the next Tour de France. So screw you, Lance Armstrong. I'm going to set a record.
So, that's the speed of
Can I just ask, Jennifer, have you ever used an e-bike before? Like one of those electric powered ones?
Dude, I have one. Are you kidding me? I love e-bikes. What did you say about them? That's my 5th bike, and I'm not kidding.
50 kilometers an hour, though.
50 kilometer per
yeah,
hour.
that would be the
e-bike.
best.
Yeah, that's like a badass
that
moped.
Is the bomb. That is badass because here's the deal. My e-bike is capped at 20. They're in this state, they're capped at 20 and 28 miles per hour. 20 is like walking. I want to be super clear. 50 kilometers an hour, I'm going to get right in line for that one. I'm all over it.
Tyler? I'll bring my cables to hack it.
Tyler? That's the thing is I can hack mine. Yeah, they can be hacked. I just haven't done it
Aren't
yet.
they hard to pedal?
Okay, we have to move to the AI room.
They're pedal assist. They're not mopeds. They're pedal assist. So they're great. You can get them for road bikes. You'll see all kinds of people on them now. They're super discreet. A lot of road bikes, a lot of mountain bikes. They're a little bit more obvious on the mountain bikes, and mine's a street cruiser bike.
Okay.
So I go to people's houses.
Subway while riding.
Bike story. I want to talk bikes some more.
More than 15 to 20 on that one.
May, your mic is really quiet. Yeah.
Most of the Dutch bikes go that fast as well because Netherlands has kilometers of bike paths. So that's not unfamiliar. Even VanMoof, what was the name of the company that had the bike?
Yes, VanMoof.
Yeah, VanMoof, actually, they commented on one of the tweets that I tweeted out. Yeah, VanMoof is got a fast bike. I mean, their basic bike goes really fast, but the actual paths for the bikes are allowed to go the kilometer of a moped, like of a scooter.
Down boy.
Yeah, isn't that anti-Dutch though to use an assist, like a pedal assist?
No.
Don't they take away your citizenship or something?
No, Dutch have been progressive engineering for forever. Their entire world exists on being able to hold back the oceans and engineer everything in proximity. They've got a very big appreciation for using technology when it's appropriate.
So who's starting?
Yeah, but isn't it dangerous when you're totally high?
Yep, Kemi has
they're pretty safe about it.
Yeah, we got to get the AI room started here.
Yes.
Who's going to start that?
Kemi.
Okay.
I love the bike discussion personally. I think that's really interesting.
Is that
I remember
Jennifer or
Shouldn't
Alexander?
there be an AI to start the AI room?
We should have AI and bike riding room.
But
who said AI to start the AI
I
room? That's
think.
funny.
Yeah, it's a Canadian. The one.
what about
The
couldn't
Canadians, damn it.
the food delivery services, the gorilla drivers and the Instacart folks could really benefit from these 50-kilometer-per-hour e-bikes?
Hey, now
Actually,
get to the
Tyler,
delivery.
in Netherlands, they already use those bikes. They already have a speed electric bikes. Uber here, Deliveroo, Thuisbezorgd, they all of the delivery services that are from restaurants, they all have e-bikes. They all use them. Gorillas and Flink and Giefer, those are all like basically bike for grocery shopping. But the challenge is Uber Eats, those bikes are provided by like Uber. Whereas on Gorilla and Flink and Giffer, they actually, you use your own bike, which is where it's very interesting because the Dutch on average have about 4 to 5 bikes per person here. So they really love their bikes. And honestly, you would get hit by a bike before you get hit by a car in Netherlands because exactly what you're just seeing with Vamoof, the people don't want the cars. They're really a sharing economy here. They don't want the cars. They want the sharing cars. They want to have their bikes and they want their bikes to go fast because there's so many bike paths and it saves so much time and effort getting around a couple of the towns and the areas around Amsterdam, Haarlem, Rotterdam. Like you literally could go further with that bike than if you have to park a car and stuff. And drinking and smoking on bikes is very common here. And the one cool thing that you'll see here is they actually ride the bike without holding the handlebars. That's pretty tight.
That was the ultimate mark of cool when we were kids. Like the person who, like, it was always a guy because guys are dumb, but it was
Dude,
always
we
a
all ride
guy.
without. You have to be able to ride without your hands on the handlebars.
But Jennifer, it's next level here because when you see a man dressed up in a suit on his mobile and biking to work in Zoudas, it's definitely next level when you see like someone dressed to the nines on a bike.
Oh no, you
Now
wouldn't
he's
do
going to
that
have
here.
a
You
DUI
would
full
though.
not
bike
get your
with
feet
his car.
sweaty
If
here.
you're
You
like
would not
drinking
do
on
that.
your bike though, is that
No,
like a
people bike to
DUI
work
on
all
a?
the time here. People
No,
bike. I'm in Marina. We bike into the city all the time. But you have all of your stuff nicely folded in a Gucci little. It's called a bike, carrier backpack for your clothes. And you shower when you get there and you change into them.
We take the no hands thing even one step further in Thailand on the mopeds. I've seen a whole lot of no hands on mopeds over here.
that's a little bit crazy, Tyler.
Yeah, it works though, believe it or not. Like the bike has it's weird, but it works. I've done it, and it's risky, but it works. Anyway, so we're going to jump over to the AI weekly newsroom with Cami and Cheryl and Tina and Nalurmi, who are already over there waiting for us.